all our guests on the platform. I think let's start with our meeting. This meeting is it's a continuation of the meeting that we held last week, which we were unfortunately not able to proceed with it, given the apologies that we received from the executive. So we felt that we needed to reschedule so that when we discuss these matters, we discuss them in the presence of the executive, the minister, the deputy minister. So we had rescheduled for today. We received the necessary approvals. And I would like to take this opportunity and thank the members for making themselves available. We know that we have officially commenced with our constituency and recess period. So Parliament has risen. And so we appreciate the fact that members are able to make it to this meeting. I don't know if there is apologies. Anele, I think there is an apology from... Okay, let me just allow you to give us the apologies.
Good morning, Chair. We received an apology from Honorable Boshoff. That's the only apology that I received, Chair.
Okay. All right. Yes, we did receive an apology from Honorable Boshoff, who's on oversight activities. He indicated that there is no connectivity in the area where he is doing his own work. We know that the Northern Cape is quite vast, and there are some areas where there's challenges of connectivity. But otherwise, that's the only apology that we got. We also received an apology from the chairperson of Wits Council, who indicated that unfortunately was not able to make alternative arrangements for the engagement. I think he has got a board meeting or something like that. And so he's not going to be able to attend, but there is a delegation from Wits that will be part of this meeting. Yeah, I think those are the only apologies. We have requested stakeholders to make supplementary submissions to us, just to supplement any part that they may not have been able to cover. But I'm told that the only organization that has made supplementary submission to us is SAUS. I only got that not long ago. So we will allow any supplementary submissions to be made, but we're not going to give enough time for that. So last week when we concluded, we had received all the presentations. Maybe before I go to last week, maybe just to say that we moved the meeting. The meeting was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. We had to move it to 10:15 so as to allow the minister to attend an urgent meeting of cabinet this morning. He indicated that he will only be available at 10:15. So that's why we moved the meeting to 10:15 to allow him to be part of our meeting. So I hope that is either on the platform or is in the process of joining.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I did not see your name when on the platform when we started. I must take this opportunity to welcome you. And thank you for joining us in this meeting. So I was saying that last week when we adjourned, we had received all the presentations from all the stakeholders. What was outstanding was a discussion by members. So we had, I hope that members were taking notes so that members can be able to engage. I am going to request members that as we engage, please try and offer solutions, made proposal as to what could be the solutions to the issues that we are dealing with, so that we are not all over the place. Our discussions is guided. Basically, I attempted last week to try and categorize the issues. And I hope that as we engage, we will then focus on the solution that we would like to make recommendations to the executive, for the executive and the various institutions to consider. Later this afternoon, we'll be meeting with the CPUT, but we will deal with that issue, I think, later on, because we seem to be having some challenges there where it looks like there is some level of defiance by the university, not willing to come to the committee for us to continue the engagements that we had to adjourn in the past. But we'll deal with that later on. So I don't know if there is any of the stakeholders or the minister. I don't know whether the minister you'd want to say something before we take the points from members. Honorable Minister.
Sorry, Chair, I just missed. I was just attending to something quickly. What were you asking me to make some remarks?
Yes, I thought if you have got some remarks to make before we continue to get to recognize the members to engage with the presentations, maybe we should allow you. But I know that we are also constrained by the fact that you are not present when most of the presentations were made because you had to leave early. But yeah, I would like to invite you to make some comments.
Yeah, you will advise me, Chair, if I'm out of order. Because I wasn't there at the last meeting. I thought that what I need really to say is that we really should just go to the nub of the matter as far as I'm concerned. The heart of the issue is simply this, that NSFAS students are catered for, which is government's policy, with a means test, which is upper family income of 350,000 rands per annum. That is catered for and dealt with now. Through the explanation which I gave 2 weeks ago in the portfolio committee, now that we are going to be funding, not just, sorry, I didn't realize that I'm showing my mask instead of my face.
I don't help you, but
no, sorry, Chair, my apology.
Okay, it's fine.
No, what I'm saying is that, as I explained, we now have dealt with NSFAS, which is government policy. In other words, as a country, we continue to have free higher education for the poor and the working class. I think it's important, Chair, that I underline and then say, where is the challenge now? The challenge is with categories of students who do not qualify for NSFAS. In other words, who fall outside the government net, which is what we call the missing middle. Now, what we have been doing thus far is that we have been engaging the universities, the vice chancellors, to say, this matter, what is it that you can do to help us address this matter? As I say, it's beyond government's commitments. And most of the universities, they said, what they are doing, they are actually engaging their SRCs institutionally to say who actually qualifies for assistance, who needs to register. And they've put some criteria. Criteria is that within the means that they have, they will accept students who are doing well academically and on signing acknowledgement of debt. Indeed, some universities have actually done that. They've gone furthest. One of the universities that has gone furthest is University of the Western Cape. They've said all students who fit that category, we have accepted them. Wits has gone also, I don't want to speak for Wits University, they can speak for themselves, but what we are aware also they had even identified the actual numbers of students which they thought are deserving cases, and then they will see how far they can be able to go. On the side of government, Cabinet has taken a decision that I must come back to Cabinet by June with a proposal, a framework on how we deal with student funding comprehensively, including the missing middle. But in the meantime, I am collecting data, and I've asked the universities to give me some detailed data that, together with government, we can urgently look at and see if there is anything that could be done to assist those genuine cases. That data simply is this: what is the profile of student debt in each institution, and then bring it together. For example, Chair, what we are interested in as government is there debt that can be written off for whatever reason, that it's not collectible anymore? Number two, which students are owing? What categories of students are owing? Because we also need to know that. Because there are students who are owing, genuinely their case is missing middle. But there are students who are owing who come from wealthy families, who can really afford to pay. We need to make a distinction so that we have a profile, proper profile of the data, which I am hoping that I will get that by the end of the week, by Friday, from the universities. But in the meantime, our best bet so far is that negotiations and discussions at institutional level is the best route thus far. Because when that information comes back, I will have to take it back to government, to cabinet, and say, here's how things look like. But I don't want to stand here and then commit government is going to do A, B, or C in relation to those categories as things stand now. Because government's deal is done insofar as NSFAS is concerned. But nevertheless, we understand the plight of these students. We understand. That is why as government, we are collecting information onto the profile. In other words, the exact detail of the nature of the debt that is facing our universities. So that's what I just want to say, Chair, so that we cut to the chase. We know exactly the issue. For instance, we mustn't conflate NSFAS and missing middle. We mustn't say because NSFAS students are not covered and then say there is no free higher education for any category in South Africa, because that would be false. There is free higher education now for the working class and the poor, which government is honoring. So that is the issue, Chair, that I will then hear from you as to what kinds of questions do stakeholders or whoever else have for me in particular. I'm continuing to engage with USAf. We have also been convening the post-school education and training task team, the ministerial task team, which I've asked the DM to chair. I will also continue to be meeting with student leadership, SAUS executive in particular, who I'm meeting towards the end of the week, so that we continue to say, where are we and what is happening? I hope, Chair, that input of mine is helpful so that we zoom in into the issues and not be all over as if government has not met its part of the deal insofar as the working class and the poor is concerned. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think that is helpful comments in helping to situate the problem or the issue. As you say that we need to cut to the chase, but it does help to also guide the discussions that are going to ensue. I think before I take the members, we have asked for supplementary submissions, and we've received one from SAUS. So I'm going to take 5 minutes to ask SAUS to just supplement whatever information that they've given us in the past. And then from there, I will open for members to then engage. I think we will engage on all the presentation, make comments, make suggestions on all the presentations that we have made, but focusing on what could be the solution, because we want to be forward-looking in our approach. We want to make suggestions that will help the executive, the minister, to attend to all the issues that has been brought to the surface. The minister has helped us to identify some of them. I think in the past we also tried to say, let's categorize what are the issues so that we then offer solution to each of the categories of the difficulties that are experienced in the sector. So let me invite Thabo is here. In 5 minutes, Thabo, last week, Wednesday, SAUS did make a presentation. So we asked everybody to say, do you want to supplement the presentation that we've made? We only received an indication from yourself. So we are going to allow you about 5 minutes or so to take us through what are the additional issues that you want to raise.
Thanks, Chair.
Maybe before Thabo comes in, sorry, Thabo. I just need to clarify, Chair, with your permission,
okay.
Honorable Chair, that I've been told that this session finishes at 12, after which you have got another item. So I had planned then along those lines, you know, in shifting my also other engagements to say, I will be free then just after 12. I thought that I needed to raise this because these days, even if one has made an arrangement and we then get presented as in the media as if we don't want to cooperate with you, Chair, when in fact I do want to cooperate with you and the portfolio committee. Thank you.
Okay. Well, no, it's fine, Honorable Minister. We'll try and finish here. We had scheduled 2 appointments, 2 engagements. So we'll try and finish by then, but I think there was just an hour that we had to forfeit because we wanted to create some space for you to join us at 10:15. Yes, you are right. I think some of the reportage about last week's meetings was a bit unfortunate because it created an impression that your apology was not accepted by the meeting, which was not the case. You did indicate that you had to leave. We did accept your apology, but as you know, some things are beyond our control. But let's try and finish at 12. If we are not finishing at 12 minutes, I'm just going to urge you to say, please, maybe 30 minutes or so that we're able to finalize. But I think we have got enough time now. Thabo, are you able to do that in 5 minutes to supplement your submission? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to yourself and to the House at large, of course, and to the Minister who's present here. I think, Chair, with the supplementary presentation, I'll try to be quick, maybe skip a few of the stuff which might have been covered last week, considering that the slides have been sent, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and distributed. But I think picking up from last week, SAUS, following last week's meeting, the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee meeting, a number of events and a number of meetings did take place. So we thought it would be interesting to, inform this sitting in particular of the recent developments which bring us here today, and perhaps to be able to shape a way forward. So I think just a brief recap, Chair, on Monday, the national shutdown was put into effect by a number of institutions, 18 at most, 5 for completing the 2020 academic year, and 3 institutions had already indicated that they were resolving issues at an institutional level. And so a number of factors were not allowing for a shutdown, but they were still engaging with their students as to what would be an amicable way forward in terms of clearing broader historic debt. We are also aware that the Vice Chancellors met with the Minister last week, Tuesday, to discuss the 15 demands that were submitted by SAUS. And the outcomes of this meeting were not yet shared with us, but we can confirm a meeting between SAUS and USAf has been confirmed for later this week. And I'm sure then we'll get an update in that particular sense. On Wednesday, again, I think that the concession of SAUS after last week Wednesday's portfolio committee meeting was that when the minister had left and the deputy minister as well subsequently left after their presentation, didn't leave enough ground to deal and engage with some of the issues so that we can come up perhaps with a solution at a national level. So we're hoping perhaps maybe this time around we'll be able to stay each other and guide each other towards addressing these demands and being able to stabilize the sector, which is something as students are also determined to do. Also the ministerial task team, the ministerial COVID-19 task team, which is chaired by the deputy minister, also convened last week. SAUS was present in that meeting. Again, it is the view of the union that we have a growing concern with the stagnation and the inability of the task team to continue effectively with the work if it is to be reduced to merely talk shows and no tangible solutions are going to come out in terms of dealing with some of the challenges in the higher education sector. On Friday last week, SAUS met with the Public Protector's Office and the South African Human Rights Commission, where we successfully presented our case for education as a human right and also the right to protest in South Africa. This comes about as the brutality that we've experienced as students by the SAPS, including the private security by a number of the universities, which I'll speak to in the last slide, Chairperson. At the meeting with the Public Protector and the South African Human Rights Commission resolved that we'll collectively set up mechanisms to identify and investigate the violation of student rights, including the abuse of power by vice chancellors through court interdicts, suspensions, and expulsions of student leaders and activists. An urgent meeting was called last week Sunday, this past Sunday, the 21st of March in Pretoria. An invitation was formally sent to the minister on Wednesday last week, inviting him to discuss the demands brought forward by SAUS. We were notified over the weekend that the ministers had other commitments and would not be able to join the meeting, and we were told that he would send the deputy minister, Deputy Minister Buti Manamela, only to be informed as well that the deputy minister would not be able to join the meeting that we had yesterday, or 2 days ago, in Pretoria. So regrettably, the meeting then reaffirmed the need to continue with the national shutdown, and that the inability of the minister in particular to engage directly with SRCs is something that they do not take kindly to, because issues have been brought forward from their campuses. A number of issues are, they have a duty to represent those particular constituencies, and they cannot come to a situation where the minister is able to engage them and to take them into confidence in terms of how we can resolve some of these issues and restore the academic calendar peacefully and smoothly. The meeting, I think, Chair, as I bring it to a close soon, The meeting also resolved that since the beginning of the shutdown, the SRCs have failed to engage with the minister. They therefore have mandated SAUS officials to facilitate a stakeholder engagement with the minister. And I think you would have heard through his submission that a meeting has been confirmed for later this week. And we're hoping that meeting perhaps will be able to address, in detail and in length, some of our concerns in the sector and with the minister. The meeting also resolved that in line with our concerns, we must meet with USAf, which is the union body of vice chancellors, to be able to engage with them some of the challenges that are peculiar to some of the universities. So for instance, while we're engaging at a national level of historic debt, which is the next point, they mandated us to ask this portfolio committee to really raise a motion in parliament to deal with the issue of historic debt in this country. We've seen other departments, other entities get the likes of ESCOM and SAA and so forth, receive bailout. So we're really asking this house to really consider the issue of 13 billion rand debt. A number of universities at their own level to deal with these issues. It requires a national approach because you'll see that, for instance, the University of Western Cape had lifted the blocks to allow students to register, including those who do not have government funding. But we are of a view as SAUS that just lifting the blocks is a short gap measure because come next year, the debt is not cleared and the debt will still be in place. So we face with the same conditions next year. Students will not be able to register. So our saying is yes, alleviate the immediate pressure, but they don't deal with the long-term systemic issue of student debt. You would have seen Stellenbosch University, for instance, last week, released communication that they gave all their students bursaries, historic debt. Now we're realizing as a sector that the issue of historic debt cannot be left to the universities alone because different universities are capacitated differently. The ability of Stellenbosch University to clear debts from 2020 of all of its students through one-time bursaries is not an ability that, for instance, a University of Zululand can uphold in that particular sense, or a University of Limpopo. So we're saying that there needs to be a national conversation around clearing the historic debt and a rejection of any budget cuts that speak to higher education, because it is the reduction of these grants which force institutions to increase tuition fees, which then fall on students who don't have government funding, which creates this particular missing middle debt that we're speaking to. So in some chairs, I close, in broader efforts to intensify the national shutdown, which will continue, is continuing as of today. A number of universities in KZN will be joining as well because they were observing the planting of the late king last week. We are also going to be mobilizing the National Education, Health and Workers Union. We're also going to be mobilizing the taxi industry in line with rolling mass action, to target various sites of government, including National Treasury, the Department of Higher Education, NSFAS, the union buildings and parliament, up until we can deal with the broader issues that are facing the students, which have been placed on the demands. But we're hoping, of course, that even the engagements in this week that we're encouraging with the minister will be able to bring us to some immediate agreement and consensus in the sector. I think, Chair, I'll leave it there for now, but the broader conclusions and remarks have been put in the presentation, and I'm hoping perhaps maybe as the presentations go along, the members of the committee will be able to engage and to really sympathize with the student issues that are put forward before us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Comrade Thabo. I'm now going to take members. Can I get an indication from members who wants to engage? Okay, no hands at all, I think. All right, let's start with the Honorable King. Honorable King and Honorable Letsie, and then take the hands as they come.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson, and morning everyone on the platform. Yes, Chair, this is very concerning, and as the Minister said, let's get right to the point of it. It is obviously that NEFSA don't have funding. They should have been honest with us in the first place, even before the Minister indicated that there would be a 6.8 billion rand shortfall. What we've actually done now in the short term was just to cover a little scab of the actual wound that is going to be there for years to come if we don't look at a complete overhaul of NEFSA. Otherwise, we will see NEFSA going again into some form of administration, which is just prolonging the whole issue. So, Chair, the one thing that the minister must get us clear is, why in the first place was the Air Commission's report not looked at properly? And will the department actually look at the Air Commission's report? If not, will the department then have a multi-party, including us as other political party members, to form part of an ad hoc committee to look at the student funding in the long run? Because sustainably, a bursary scheme will not work. We need to re-look again at a loan mechanism. Only when students are going to repay that loan back on the basis that they work, they earn a certain salary level, and we get SARS involved in order to get those money from the prospective students in the long run. That will make NEFSA more sustainable, because at this moment, we're sitting with a 34.5 billion rand on national student financial aid payouts yearly, which means by next year it will be 50, the year after it might be 60. We will not be able to cover that. Yes, we do say free higher education at the basic level, but at the higher education level, it is not absolute. Hence, we say, look at a loan model where those under the 350,000 benchmark of salary in their homes, we cover them completely. With accommodation, with transport, with tuition, with everything on this loan basis, which is then converted into a bursary once they have shown that they have met the academic qualifications. What's also concerning is that NEFSA is not actually streamlining its funding into critical skills. Hence, we will see that most of our students would have funding, they would still have no investment into the economy, because they have actually gone into a market which is very saturated, meaning that they will be struggling to find employment. Whereas if you look at the critical skills, that investment you've put into that student would then culminate into the economy. What we also need to get, though, Chairperson, is to seriously sit and look at the missing middle, as the minister said.
Honorable King, may I ask Honorable Menaniso to please mute?
Okay, Chairperson.
Okay.
Okay,
My
Chairperson.
apologies, continue.
Okay, it's just that we need to seriously sit and look at the missing middle, because it is going to escalate and they're not going to get funding. Hence, this loan approach for them would work very much, and then they would repay that money back into the system. So we need to consider looking at that as well. But my biggest concern is, Chairperson, that we have now taken the funding from universities, which already had a 24.6 billion rand shortfall on their allocation. So how is NEFSA going to be able to fund not only this year, but the years going on to that? And I do second what the student said when it comes to allowing those still owing to register. And then we will look at how they will then be able to be funded. But it should be done on a university and a case-by-case basis, because as of the day, NEFSA is not even clear where are the students going to receive their funds. We have students daily. As of this morning, I was contacted by a student begging me, please, when am I getting this NEFSA funding? Because I've registered, I've applied. Now my mom is going to sit with a huge debt should NEFSA not come through with me. Surely that frustration and that uncertainty should have been covered by students long ago. And now we're going to sit with a continuation of unrest, because the minister should be aware, if NEFSA is not going to pronounce when each student will be receiving their funding, that fight on the street will continue. And I understand why it would continue, because an uncertain student don't want to put more pressure on their parents to say, I've registered, and yet be told later on in the year, hold on, but you didn't qualify. We've seen many of those cases happening. So at this current juncture, all we want out of this is for NEFSA to be clear and tell us when exactly the date that each and every university will be receiving the funding, so that students can be able to peacefully go to class. The missing middle, please register most of those kids on the missing middle, work on a loan agreement with them on how to repay it. Those universities, like the others of Stellenbosch, which was mentioned, obviously can afford, but we need to look at the smaller universities who cannot. And lastly, Chair, in order to cover all of this, our higher institutions are over-enrolled. And the over-enrollment is causing a serious crisis on the university system. Whereas we should have long ago have upgraded our TVET colleges and streamlined most of our critical skills into the TVET colleges so that we absorb and make it more fundable for them to go there. It is cheaper and it is better for the economy when they have a proper skill instead of a theoretical background, which would just see them queuing in the unemployment lines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable King. Can we get Honorable Litsia?
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like you guys to accept my apology for not putting my video on. My network is a little bit.
I will object to Honorable Letsia speaking if he's going to mention anything about yesterday's game.
There was no game yesterday, Minister. It's okay.
The game on Saturday, or Minister, do you refer to a game on Saturday?
It was on Sunday.
On Sunday. Sorry.
On Sunday. Okay. No, I'm ruling that Honorable Litsia must not say anything about Sunday.
Yes, the only thing I'll mention about Sunday is that I did 11-kilometer hiking. That's all, Chair. But Chair, my network is a little bit bumpy this morning, so I would not be putting my video on. I would make a couple of comments before going to questions. One is on the issue of CPUT, Chair. I think I would like to lobby this sitting honorable members who are going to speak after me to agree with the proposal that I'm making, which is that let's subpoena CPUT, Minister. CPUT seems to be not wanting to account, so let's subpoena them to come. I mean, there are a lot of issues at CPUT, Chair, that needs to be speedily resolved. So I'm putting a proposal that we subpoena them to appear before the committee, because this thing of coming with excuses every time they must appear here seems like it's gaining momentum there at CPUT. Secondly, on NSFAS, I think I want to agree with Honorable King that NSFAS must speedily resolve some of the issues, that in my view should be resolved by now. There are a number of students who continue to make contact with us, who are returning students and who have done well academically, who have been funded in previous years, but as things stand, they can't register because NSFAS has not, or they're not cleared by the institution, because NSFAS, between NSFAS and the institutions, they've not been communicating well. So some of those students are sitting at home now frustrated and they can't register because of that. So NSFAS must just sort out that mess. And these are returning students who, in my understanding, they should have been, they should have long been resolved. We understand the challenge of shortfall was mainly on new or first time entering students, but we still have returning students who have done well academically, who are not affected by the N+ rule, who have progressed very well with some of them with a number of distinctions, but they can't register now. So let's deal with that. So, Minister, the NDP states that students who do not qualify for NSFAS should have access to bank loans backed by the state securities or sureties, and that bank loans should be recovered through arrangements with South African Revenue Services. The 2019-2024 medium-term strategic framework prioritized the development of a sustainable policy on the missing million. You actually, Minister, briefed us on the 19th of June 2020 on this matter. Can you please, clarify us of the progress? How far are you in dealing with that particular matter of the missing million? Secondly, one of the measures implemented by government to address the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 was the Skills Development Levy contribution, 4 months holiday. Furthermore, most companies that contributed skills levy were also impacted by lockdown. Some have closed down, while some are still recovering. This means that entities like the CPUT and the National Skills Fund had a reduced income for the 2020-2021 financial year, including the outer 2020-21 MTEF period. The reprioritization, yeah, you see this thing of going to township schools now, it's catching up, of 3.3 billion from the NSF to address the NSFAS funding shortfall will have adverse effects on the skills development intervention, as you clearly indicated in your presentation last week. In particular, unemployed youth. Are we saying that university students must get priority over other groups, such as training of the SMMEs and cooperatives, learners trained through the community-based skills initiative? Okay, I've mentioned this commitments of NDP. The second one here is that we've committed the Department of Higher Education and Training to produce 30,000 artisans by 2030. In addition, the department has produced a list of occupations in high demand, and most of those occupations are not offered by these universities. Our country needs occupational skills. How is the department going to balance funding the shortfall of the NSFAS and other skills needed? What are the NSF projects that will be impacted by the reprioritization? Whether this reprioritization will come from the 2021 or 2021-2022 budget of the NSF. Can you just clarify us there? Some of government pronouncements in December 2017 were the following. Government spending on universities as per percentage of GDP will increase from 0.68% to 1% over the next 5 years. It is 4 years since the pronouncement by the former president, President Zuma. What is the current government spending on universities as per the percentage of GDP? Are we where we're supposed to be, compared to other countries? If not, what should be done? Government will further investigate the viability of online and blended learning as an additional mechanism to deal with capacity challenges across the PSET sector. COVID-19 has compelled the system to quickly move into online and blended learning. This will address challenges of infrastructure, as it will reduce the need for brick and mortar learning facilities and the increased demand for traveling allowances and student accommodation. How do we capitalize, Minister, on the best practices of online and blended learning learned during this COVID going forward? To USAf, a blanket approach to dealing with student historic debt will be detrimental to the financial sustainability of some universities. For example, I think it was last week, the University of Zululand indicated that 76.6% of its student population is funded by NSFAS and 7.2% is funded by other government departments, meaning that 83% of its student population is fully funded as per the 2020 stats. Only 17% of the students are self-funded or funded by other sponsors. Therefore, allowing this small group of students to register without paying debt will not make a huge dent to the university cash flow. We cannot say the same to VETs, for an example, as we saw last week in their presentation, where only 32%, 12,000 as per the management presentation, of the students are NSFAS funded, meaning we've got 68% of the students who are not an NSFAS. The committee will be considering the 2021-2022 METF budget of the Department of Higher Education and Training in May. What would USAf recommend to us in terms of funding of universities in light of the current challenges. To SAUS and to Wits SRC, I just want to make a point that there are some of the students who are now at universities who come from, who matriculated from, expensive schools or expensive private schools, and some of them charge above 200,000 rand per annum. And when the students get to universities, to our public universities, they want free education. Clearly, they can afford, and I think we must try and persuade those who can afford to continue to pay. But I do agree with you guys, with both SAUS and the students, that those who cannot afford, universities must make other means. We take the point from SAUS Thabo that maybe we must look at, settling this thing of historic debt. And I take the minister's point earlier today that they will be now engaging with yourselves later this week, to come up with proper solutions. I think we must try by all means, Minister, to manage contradictions. It can't be that every year at the beginning of the year we have strikes. Let's manage contradictions better. Let's make sure that we do, come up with solutions for next year. We don't want to have a situation where next year again we have strikes such as this one. Let's try to come up with long-lasting solutions. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for the indulgence.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Litsi. You did raise quite a number of issues. I hope all the stakeholders are taking notes. We are currently taking members of parliament. I'm going to request that those on the platform who are not members should not raise their hand. We will give all the stakeholders an opportunity to comment at a later stage. Can we have Honorable Mukacha?
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to honorable members, and good morning to our colleagues from the various entities, as well as to the student leadership that is present in this meeting this morning. Chair, I think you've covered me by and large on the concerns that we have with regards to the instability that we face at the beginning of each academic year. I think as a commitment of this portfolio committee since the start of our term, we've been very clear about the fact that we would like to see this normalization of instability at the beginning of each term be eradicated. And that is why we remain consistent and insistent in the fact that we need to be able to project as a sector collectively on what could possibly be the challenges that students are faced with at the beginning of the year. Chair, perhaps I should, it's very clear, Chair, that the inability for NSFAS to roll out the initial payments to institutions of higher learning at the beginning of the year, of which we've received the explanation on why that could not be done, considering the staggered approach to the beginning of the year. But we must acknowledge as a portfolio committee that it has had a great impact in the sector. And perhaps I'd also like for Minister and perhaps the department to also make an analysis of something I'm observing. It seems, Chair, that there seems to be a greater effort by institutions whose financial standing may not be solid as those that are historically advantaged to make concessions at the beginning of the year to accommodate students and their historical debt, or not being able to pay registration at the beginning of the year, and various other demands by students. But institutions who historically would have better financial standing don't seem to be coming to the fore in terms of making those particular concessions. And I think it's just something that we need to observe as a sector. And I don't know if this speaks perhaps to the challenges we're having with regards to institutional autonomy and how that really sets us back, I think, as a sector in terms of trying to create some sort of synergy between various institutions, those historically advantaged and those historically disadvantaged. Now, moving on to Wits University, Chair, I'd like to understand if there has been a consideration of the request by the SRC to have registration conclude on the 30th of March. One notes in the presentation made by the university that they've extended registration to the 19th of March, yet the SRC requested that it be extended to the 30th of March. One would also like to understand, Chair, or confirm, there's been a lot of concern by the SRC at Wits University around the stats and the numbers that are being presented either to the media or to students or to the department. So I'd like us, Chair, to really have a true reflection of the data that's being shared in society with regards to what is happening at Wits University. I also think, Chair, it's very important that management work closely with the SRC to ensure that the SRC can trust the data that's being produced by management. So what SRC knows to be the stats needs to be the same thing that needs to be in par with what management is saying to other stakeholders in society. So I'd like a confirmation of whether or not we're still standing at a 97% registration rate currently, or if there have been any developments since last Wednesday when we met. If it's only 97% of the students have registered, then we should have, if the institution is saying that they have 37,500 students, then we should have about 1,125 students who aren't registered. And if that's the case, then perhaps some of the concessions that students are requesting could be considered. But I mean, those are just that's the maths that I've been able to do with all the figures that I've sort of been able to pick up on that the university has presented. And you know, if I'm mistaken, I'm not a mathematician, but if I'm mistaken, then can we have clarity on that regard? But I think if 97% of the students have registered, then that 3% should be able to be considered in under various concessions made by the institution. Now, if we're saying there's 37,000 students, 500,000 students, the 27,000 are set to be receiving funding in various forms, or assistance with funding in various forms, which leaves us with about 10,500 students. Are these students who the institution has analyzed in terms of where they're standing? Are these students who we are saying can afford to pay their fees on their own, or we just haven't been able to account on how else, they're fee-paying students, but are they able to pay their fees? And has the institution been able to make an analysis of, in terms of their constituents or the population that attends the institution, who is able to afford and who is not, despite whether or not they're fee paying or not fee paying, or they're funded or not funded. I think this just is important in terms of the institution being able to better prepare around their finances. And then, Chair, I'd like to understand, so on slide 11, this institution speaks a lot to multiple fundraising campaigns. There's a 10 million and another 10 million and then 100 million that has been considered. The SRC raises concerns around, the fundraising campaign, and there seems to be the SRC and management are not seeing eye to eye with regards to the multiple fundraising campaigns of the institution. Now, out of the money that has been raised by the institution indicates that it's currently been able to assist 794 students, and that they're assessing 557 students. Can we have an update on that since Wednesday? And these various figures that have been given here, would this 10 million, 220 million be able to assist the amount of students that the institution is consistently referring to assisting in various slides? So in various slides, where when you look at the demands made by the SRC, the institution says, we will look into the hardship fund, we will look into the hardship fund. Do the multiple fundraising campaign strategies of the institution have capacity to assist the number of students that the SRC is then referring to as those that need to be assisted. I hope I'm making sense, Chair. On slide 14, I'd like the institution acknowledges the fact that they are aware that many parents will be affected by COVID-19, the economic or socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19. What concessions speak directly to that particular consideration for parents? And then I'd like to understand, Chair, the institution says that in 2020, 9,645 students were on NSFAS, and they are currently aware of about 6,419 students who should be on NSFAS in the year 2021, but are awaiting a confirmation from NSFAS on other students. However, the figures I get from NSFAS are that in 2020, we had about 10,597 students. So there's a difference between what the university presented. They're saying 9,645 students were funded by NSFAS in 2020. And then the stats I'm getting from NSFAS is that 10,597 students were funded in 2020. Can we just have a clarity? I think there should be colleagues from NSFAS on the platform. Can we just have clarity between the institution and NSFAS? How many students exactly were funded by NSFAS in the year 2020, and how many do we anticipate to be funded by NSFAS in the year 2021? I then have a concern, Chair, with the fact that the department has allowed institutions to individually decide on the blended learning approach. And this is understood because it takes into consideration the capacity of various institutions. But one would appreciate clarity on Wits's approach, particularly with the concerns that the SRC has raised and how, on what the social distancing mechanisms seem to be in your residences. So, and this might not be spoken to in complete in this meeting, but if the institution is able to provide a detailed sort of breakdown on how they plan to roll out their social distancing mechanisms on campus. And if the SRC has been consulted or engaged in this particular approach, because the SRC needs to be able to also communicate to its constituency on what the approach is, because they have the responsibility of making sure that their constituency understands the decisions that have been made by the institution. I think the SRC must never be seen as a structure in the institution that only comes and brings problems, but is also part and parcel of or brings concerns forward, but is also seen as a structure that can assist in the governance of the institution, as they are a governance structure of the institution. Sorry, Chair, I'm just trying to wrap up. I've raised my concerns on understanding the science around how many of the demands of the SRC have been referred to the COVID relief fund or the hardship fund, and one of course would like empirical evidence on how these funds will assist all the students. And I think my biggest concern, Chair, is the possibility of other students being left behind, even though we continuously refer to the fact that they may be assisted by the hardship fund. I think we mustn't, as we respond to concerns being raised, we must be very wary, Chair, of giving very surface level sort of responses in order to, I guess, appease the student population. We must be confident that whatever concessions or responses we're giving to students could possibly really alleviate the pressures on the ground. There was concerns raised by the SRC, Chair, in terms of historical debt concessions made by the institution. Is this correct? Is this true that the concessions made with regards to historical debt for students has regressed since last year? It seems as though the university is not giving as much leeway as it was giving in the previous years. Can one have detail with regards to that? Can we have clarity on laptops? Because in the initial statement of the SRC, they raised matters regarding to laptops not being available for students, yet on slide 29, it says laptops were couriered to students. So there's a bit of disjuncture in terms of sentiments by the SRC and management there. And then with regards to students who are waiting for NSFAS decisions, how are we making sure that they don't lose their places at the institution? That's with regards to first-year students in particular. And then the SRC raises matters around being denied access to campus. I think that's very problematic, Chair, because SRC is part of the governance of the institution. It's like barring the Vice Chancellor access to the institution. And then there was I guess, you know, a circulation of the fact that there were suspension letters sent to various students and to members of the SRC after the NPA had decided not to arrest 7 students that were protesting. Is this true? Were suspension letters sent to the SRC? Can that be verified, Chair? Can clarity be given there? And then, Chair, I think with regards to police brutality, and SAUS has spoken largely to this, Chair, I think it's very important, Chair, that there be a review on how on security on campus. So when you're speaking to low campus security, when speaking to police presence on campuses, I think we need to, as a sector, review policies that stand on how we need to deal with protest action across the board. And I think, Minister, there needs to be a standardization of how the securitization of institutions takes place, Chair. And then I really think, Chair, that as a portfolio committee, we should recommend that DIRCO, through its conflict management, negotiation, and resolution training, that it really assists vice chancellors across the board, police, and various stakeholders in the sector, including us as public representatives, on how to manage, conflict and be able to negotiate and ultimately resolve on various matters with each other in the sector. Chair, I also want to make a recommendation through this portfolio committee that the CETA on safety and security, really intervenes in holding a workshop to explain to police in terms of how they must execute their responsibilities in a democratic South Africa. And then
did I hear you say lastly?
That was the last, that was like the second last one, Chair. I'm trying my best not to be like Honorable Itsiye. But I think that the last 2 chairs, that on data issues that continue to be a concern in the sector, as we continuously see hybrid, remote, virtual learning take place, Chair, we need to accelerate the conversation between DHET, the Department of Communications, and DSI in terms of the conversation we need to be having with network providers, because I think students are really struggling with regards to access to data. And then NSFAS, Chair, we really need to accelerate our visit to NSFAS because the challenges in NSFAS continue to be a concern. And we welcome the various recommendations, I think, Chair, that have been made by student leadership and by, well, both at Wits SRC and SAUS. I think they're very progressive, and we really thank the Minister also for availing himself to engage with SAUS in the days to come. I think that's been a great call by SAUS, and we are glad that there's finally a response to students. And yeah, thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Mkhatshwa. Can we have Honorable Mananiso?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I'm mostly covered by Honorable Litsie and Honorable Mkhatshwa on issues of NSFAS. However, I want to make a suggestion to NSFAS to say, as much as they do nice posters when they do recruitment, they need to devise posters where they can specifically deploy their personnel to each and every institution for inquiries. Because it is a fact that every day, Chairperson, we get emails, we get WhatsApp in terms of How far is my appeal? Who do I speak to? Beneficiaries, they cannot even log on their portal. So I would want to suggest that they need to devise a poster that it's in detail in terms of who to speak to for which institution, so that we are not being caught up dealing with administrative issues than as far as portfolio committee members. The other thing, Chairperson, my question is with regard to USAf on the issue of funds that have been prioritized from the university subsidies to cater for the NSFAS shortfall. I want to know, how is the reprioritization, which the minister referred to as robbing Peter to pay Paul from universities, going to impact from their funding for this academic year? And Chairperson, lastly, is the one that the minister has spoken about in terms of collection of data for students who are in debt and students that needs to be funded from the missing metal. I heard that the minister has indicated that he has given the day of June. Can he be specific so that at least people, they know that there is a specific date for this particular process to unfold? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Machesi.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you, the Minister, for availing himself to this meeting. I just want to find out regarding the learners or students who find themselves to not to be able to go to university now because of the COVID crisis. What consensus has been put in place for those students? And also, I want to find out those students who actually come from a family of 4 or 3, who have parents that earn more than the 350,000 that the minister was talking about. What happens to those students if they find themselves with their siblings at a tertiary university? Is there any, are there cases looked case by case to ensure that they all get an NSFAS, or we only look at salary that their parents are receiving? And also, I just want to find out as well, is there any legislation that covers for students who would like to go to universities, but their parents might actually decide that they are not going to pay for their education, being whether it's because they feel like they're 18 years and above, they're adults now, they should look after themselves. Is there a legislation that can actually hold the parents accountable to say that you have to pay for the students because you can afford to pay for them? Is there anything that protects them or even advocates for them to be paid for when they are at university? And also just something that maybe the minister, I don't know if you've actually looked at this regarding those missing middle. Is there a model that we can look at that can have both the loan and also the bursary at the same time? To say that those who cannot afford to pay for their tuition, but they fall under the missing middle, can have some kind of a loan whereby they can have maybe 40% bursary or 30% bursary, and then have a loan which can only be paid once they find work when they've completed their studies. I also want to move on to maybe TVET colleges. I've been to a college which is called the Mareka TVET College in Kronstadt. And what I found is that I was going through, the courses, and I realized that they don't have specialized courses that have been provided there, because as you might know, Kronstadt is very much a farming area, and there are many students that are graduating and completing from that TVET college, but they are unable to find work. But yet there's the industry there, it is influenced by agriculture. So is there a way that maybe we can, for those kind of TVET colleges, that we can look at ways to say, can we have specialized courses that speaks
Okay, unfortunately, we are not dealing with PVET issues today, Honorable Machesi. I was trying to interject. I can see you don't hear me.
Oh, okay. Okay, no problem.
Focus is only on universities. So you'll find time to discuss the TVET later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Honorable Machesi. I see we are done in terms of the members.
Chair.
Oh, Honorable Numalo.
Yes, Chair. Good morning, Chair. You know, my hand has been up since the beginning, but it seems just to disappear.
I must apologize because I thought maybe I forgot that you are part of this committee, Honorable Numalo.
No, Chair, you're out of order. You can't forget your own members. You're out of order, Chair.
My apologies. You know, you also missed the 2 meetings before, so we don't come. All right. Apologies. It's over to you.
No, thanks, Chair, and good morning to you and honorable members, the minister and the delegation. I think I've been largely covered, Chair, but I'll just skip some of the things that I've written down and maybe start in a very myopic approach, Chair, to the minister in a sense of saying that, you know, when in my previous life as a student, when I became a president of my student organization, I think the first headline that it was in 2011, Chair. I think in my first interviews, I said that, you know, the sector is confronted by a lot of riots every beginning of an academic year. And this is a matter that we need to look into, maybe as student bodies, as well as those that are in positions of authority in the sector. Now, this was in 2011. We were not able to achieve that, but seemingly 10 years later, we are still confronted on the other side now with the same problems in the sector of saying that, you know, I can bet my salary, Chair, that even in June or in the second semester, there'll be riots in the institutions. And it has been the case ever since I stepped my first foot in a tertiary institution in 2008. Now, my myopic approach or question to the minister would be: have we not done enough research and as to what makes these sort of riots erupt in institutions, and, you know, how do we then try to manage, because it is already anticipated. You will know that some institutions in KwaZulu-Natal have said that, no, we want to complete our academic year, but we'll join in the national shutdown. Now, this tells the Chair, they already know that when they are supposed to register, there'll be a riot, there'll be a strike, there'll be a demonstration. So they've said, no, allow us to finish our academic year for 2020, and then we'll join in. Not only that they are joining into the national clarion call of a national shutdown, but because of anticipation of that, if they do not join or also demonstrate, the same problems that are confronted by students in other universities, they are directly coming to them. Now, I mean, Dr. Nzimande, Minister Nzimande has been in the department for, you know, for as far as I can remember. Now, have we not created a way to say these are what we anticipate in the sector, particularly at this time of the year, and rope in NSFAS and say, NSFAS, do you have sufficient money? How do we then fund you? How do we then assist you in terms of ensuring that those students who have actually received agreements or loan agreements with NSFAS, that the institutions, because what happens is that they will get the agreement, the institutions will allow the student to register, but NSFAS does not pay. And subsequent to that, the students' debt will accumulate to the next year, and they get another loan agreement. But what is happening now is that some institutions are saying we want 50%, 40%, 15% in order for you to register, whilst you were already benefiting from NSFAS, but NSFAS does not pay. So the student has to now find a way of how do they actually fit in that 15% in order for them to actually register. Now, that is my myopic approach, Honorable Minister, to say, how do we, have we worked a way around these issues? Because, you know, it does not help us into kicking the can down the road each time we are confronted by these issues. Because, you know, you can tell us that this Friday you'll be receiving a list that is a breakdown of how many students are owing what, and in what category they fall under. And there's another date for June. I can bet you, or I can tell you, there'll be another commitment done in the second term when we come back. So I just want to bring that in as to how much is the breakdown of these students which are in the missing middle. And you know, I want to say, Chair, as a comment, that I think Honorable Lietzimen went to this by saying that, you know, institutions like UWC, which are not largely dependent on government funding, like NSFAS and other government funding, it is mainly okay for them to say, no, come and register. And because anyway, it does not put much into their pockets, or those who are government funded. But when you go to UniZulu, you go to Mangosuthu University of Technology, you go to DUT, Midlands, and wherever, where you've got a great number of students who are reliant on NSFAS funding or government funding, though that could not be applicable to those kind of institutions, because obviously it speaks to an economic collapse of that institutions. So maybe have we found guidelines that could assist universities, Honorable Minister, that could assist universities which has got a great number of students who are dependent on NSFAS and a smaller number of students which are not dependent on NSFAS or government funding. And the Chair, to the Honorable Minister, through you, you know, the leader of SAUS has raised an issue here. You know that I come from an organization that is totally against SOE government bailouts. But it seems like this government enjoys bailing out SOEs. Has the minister ever, actually in cabinet or wherever, lobbied for funding to deal with the historic debt, as one of the members, I think Thabo, alluded to this, because they will always confront you. Maybe if students could start on a clear slate going forward, it could reduce. And then whilst government is trying to find its way in terms of how do they deal with the issues of student debt going forward, but has the minister ever lobbied for such? Because it seems like government is enjoying bailing out other state and SOEs, which are not bringing any profits, which have not been making any profits in any way. But I don't think there's been any prioritization of students which are actually in need. Whereas when we do not have money in the institution, it's not the fault of students. When NSFAS does not have money, it's not the fault of students, but it is the fault of NSFAS itself and the incapacity of our government to pay for free education as promised by this government. The second last, Chair, will be that, you know, it would be very upsetting. In fact, it would not be upsetting. It is upsetting, the fact that, you know, it's back from the day when we were students, institutions will use police and suspension letters to victimize leaders and isolate them, isolate them, divide them amongst each other. I don't know how many times we've been suspended in institutions because we're fighting for what is right for the students. And it seems like it is a democratic government that is using the same tool to isolate and silence students when they're protesting for what is rightfully theirs, and which is rightfully, not that they are taking it from somewhere. It is the very same government that promised them free education. Now, when they are rioting and demonstrating because they want free quality education, as promised by this government since 1994, which is struggling to maintain, students will be victimized, particularly student leaders. They'll be divided by management, they'll be divided by police, they'll be shot, they'll be arrested, there'll be also intimidation tactics from right across the universities. I mean, there should be, you know, I'll really want to hear from maybe at a different space, Chair, not here, but from SAUS of what are the developments with their meeting with the South African Health Human Rights Commission and the Public Protector. I think I've spoken to the different universities that some can afford to register all their students and some which cannot afford. But let the minister be explicit as to, ever since he has taken this office, I mean, like many years ago, are there any changes? Are there any improvements that we are seeing in terms of combating these riots and actually helping the majority of our students?
Thank you, Honorable Numalo. My apologies once more. Honorable King, I see your hand, but we are running out of time. I'm gonna give you 1 minute to make a point. Okay, so it's an old hand, Honorable King.
No, sorry, Chair, I had a network connectivity issue. Couldn't hear you. I just have 2 questions, Chairperson. The one is, have there been a consideration given to bring NEPSA back to you?
Give me 1 minute to raise
Yeah. Okay. Has there been a consideration given by NEPSA to bring universities back, to bring NEPSA officers into university spaces? And the last time, has there been any studies done on how blended learning at universities will affect the retention of staff at those institutions?
Okay, thank you. All right, I think members have been able to raise their comments, their questions, and their suggestions, and I think the Honorable Minister has been taking notes together with all the other stakeholders. So I am going to hand over, but before I do that, maybe just a couple of comments, and then later on I'll just come back with a summary of the discussions. Maybe let me start with VETS. Now there is an assertion made by the student leadership that the numbers that you are using is not the same with the numbers that they have, which have been provided to them. And there was a request to say, how did you come to these numbers? So there is a dispute in terms of the number of students who have been admitted, students who are still out of the system. According to the SRC, there's still over 6,000 students who have not been registered, who mainly are coming from the missing middle. According to the university, we have registered 97% of the students. So are you able to clarify these numbers? Because it is a concern to us that you don't seem to be speaking from the same page. The numbers are supposed to be as factual as possible. And so we are worried that they are not. Are you able to clarify this issue? And also, if it is 97% of the students registered, why is there a difficulty in accommodating the remaining 3%? So I would like you to really also speak to that, because it also talks to the ability of the institution to be flexible and accommodate whatever demands of the students that are there within its own financial capability. So if it is 3% of the students, are you not able to accommodate the students? I know that post our meeting, there was an announcement. I would like Wits University to confirm that announcement about the students who are owing, who will be allowed to register. What are the categories of those students who are owing? And to what extent can it cover the outstanding students who have not yet registered? The second point on VETS is access to campus by the SRC. SRC is saying they are not allowed access to campus. Is that true? If it is true, why are you not allowing SRC access? Because as Honorable Mkasha was saying, the SRC is part of the governing structures. It's an elected representatives of the students, and therefore why would they be denied access to the university so that they are able to do their work? I think let's get a response so that we're very clear and firm on this one, that there must not be access denied to campus by the SRC, which also talks to the question of suspension. Is there any? There is a very emphatic point made by SAUS and the SRC that there is a victimization of students as a result of them being vocal. Are we experiencing such a situation? Are there SRC members or student leaders who are suspended at Wits? And if so, who are those students? Now, that will be my point on Wits. On the other discussions, I think members have been able to raise the issues. Maybe let's just get an indication from NSFAS as to how many appeal are they dealing with? How many students who are still awaiting to get funding decisions from the NSFAS so that they are able to register and continue with their academic studies? Otherwise, there is an issue around underfunding of higher education. I think we know that in this financial year, the Department of Higher Education and Training received less allocation than in the past. I think it was 24 billion. And of course, this 24 billion underfunding has had an impact on the other programs of the department, in particular the NSFAS, where there was a shortfall. And I'm not sure whether the minister would be willing to talk to that. I know that he's a member of cabinet and these matters are discussed in cabinet, and maybe he might not want to contradict the view that has been taken by cabinet. But I think from where we are seated, it's a big problem to us in parliament as well as the sector in general, that higher education continues to be underfunded. And the underfunding of higher education results in a situation where we continue to experience this protest. I mean, the shortfall of NSFAS should have long been addressed without cabinet having to have an emergency meeting, look at the reprioritization from the department. So this is not even new money. This is money that has already been committed to programs in the department. Money had to be taken away from certain programs to fund the shortfall. When Treasury was aware that there's going to be shortfall, and Treasury did not make allocation for the shortfall. And for instance, I was reading this weekend newspaper where there was an attempt to justify why money was taken from higher education, which was extremely unacceptable. So that is the point that I'm making. I don't know whether the minister would want to comment on that. That going forward, there is a need for us to clearly agree what are the priorities of the democratic state and how do we fund these priorities, and fund these priorities accordingly so that we secure the future of the country and of our nation, but also we attend to other priorities. The other issues I think I will talk to later when I do summarize, because I think what is beginning to emerge from this discussion is that there is a need for certain things to be done. In as far as the commitment of government to the current policy that has been articulated of funding the working class and the poor, government has attended to that. So there is money available for that, which had to be reprioritized and make sure that the shortfall has been covered. So there are no major issues around that. What is emerging as a challenge now is the issue of the historic debt and how that debt has to be profiled. What is emerging strongly is the issue of the missing middle, on what are the solutions to to fund students who are referred to as the missing middle. And so there is a commitment that the department will go out and come back to cabinet in June with a comprehensive submission where hopefully these matters will be attended to. So I'm going to open to the stakeholders. Maybe let's start first with the stakeholders and then give to the minister to wrap up, and then I will then make my concluding comments. I'm going to request that the stakeholders, as they comment, please just be as brief as possible. You don't have to repeat the issues that you raised before. Just respond to the questions that
Honorable Chair.
Honorable Minister.
Yeah. Chair, I'm sorry if I sound problematic, but can I request to respond, and then the stakeholders can then be left to deal with the issues. And my officials will be there also to complete the session. Thank you. With your permission, Chair, I'm sorry about this.
Okay. All right. I thought maybe you would want to, in your response, also take all the issues that were raised by the stakeholders. But I think you can respond, Minister. You did indicate you have to leave at 12. So let's give you that opportunity.
Chair, thank you very much for your understanding. Precisely, by the way, I'm being chased by the very same issues that we are discussing here. So I'm sorry about that. And thanks for your understanding to the members. Yes, of course, I always have an interest in what the stakeholders are saying. Although we do interact with the stakeholders in other platforms, like on the PSET task team, as well as meeting with them individually and direct, your VCs, your student formations, your trade unions, and so on. It's not out of disinterest in their issues. Just to Thabo, I would just like to say that I'm glad that he has outlined what he has outlined. That there's a meeting there, SAUS has a meeting with the VCs, and then they have a meeting with us later in the week. Because then that we hope those further engagements will help to provide clarity. Because I must say, we're quite anxious, in fact, that the shutdown must be called off as soon as is possible, because we are worried that the academic year is already short. And let's make use of all the opportunities that we have, all sides. That's what I've been urging as minister. I'm glad some universities have settled, like UWC and a few others, and that Wits is close to also settling and so on. Because the sooner we start with the academic year, the better. Now, more so also because, by the way, we are faced with the prospects of a third wave, which may even delay us even further. Now, I would also plead, Chair. I know that normally stakeholders or some stakeholders and the opposition do not find it in them to acknowledge this. I think let's not continue to conflate the issues as I feel Honorable King continues to do. let's just all acknowledge that government has honored its side of the deal insofar as NSFAS is concerned, including SAUS. Because without sounding patronizing, SAUS does not only represent those students who fall outside of NSFAS, they also represent students who benefit from NSFAS, and they know that they benefit from NSFAS. It would be good if SAUS and other stakeholders acknowledge that government, insofar as its policies are concerned, has met its side of the deal, because that is the reality. So that we distinguish between what had to be done and has been done, and what are the real outstanding issues outside of that. Now, the data analysis as to who is owing who, it's very important, and how. As I've said, we are collecting this information. Now, Honorable King, were her issues looked at? Unfortunately, when the announcement was made in December 2017, there was not really a sufficient look at the HEHA recommendations. That is why we've agreed already with National Treasury that in preparing as the Department of Higher Education and Training for report back to Cabinet, we would have to look very closely at the HEHA Commission so that the recommendations that are there are not lost. Now, Honorable King, also would like to say that Parliament has a right to form an ad hoc committee that would like to look into student debt. It's up to Parliament to do that. But on my side, in terms of the mandate that have been given by Cabinet, I have to form a task team, which is a ministerial task team, that I will constitute in a manner that it's got enough expertise to be able to deal with the matters. And we will consult, of course. That team will have to hear everybody's views, including the views of various political parties. But I don't see the necessity, if I heard you correctly, on why a joint Parliament executive ad hoc task team. Parliament can have its own, it's not a problem. But I commit that I will actually consult with the various, I'll make sure that the team that I form will consult with everybody, Chair. Now, the issue of, Honorable King, we are raising an important matter when you raise the issue of NSFAS funding for next year and beyond. That matter, I hope, will be clarified through the medium-term budget policy statement, as well as next year's budget. But I hope that in the MTPS, it will actually be clarified. NSFAS can be able to answer questions about where it is with processing the applications, because I understand the CEO of NSFAS is here as well. So I can leave that to them, because I may not be having those details like as of today or as of yesterday, what is the progress. Honorable, let's say, well, the issue of issuing a subpoena to CPUT, that's up to the portfolio committee. And also I agree with you that it's important that NSFAS focuses on strengthening itself on an ongoing basis and responding to the issues. Now, the issue of the missing middle that we are raising, by the way, I'm glad, Honorable Letsi, you are raising this, because there is already a lot of data on the missing middle, a lot of information. Let me tell you where it is. For instance, in my earlier stint as Minister of Higher Education and Training, maybe around 2013, 2014, Dr. Lewin may remember and be able to give the exact dates. I had already initiated a process to address the issue of the missing middle, which led to the establishment of an entity called ISFA, which is a USAf Student Financial Aid Program, which I see incidentally has just got an award from some BE or from the Black Business Council, I'm not so sure. But unfortunately, at that time, Cabinet and did not take any final decision on this matter. And everything was overtaken by the announcement to establish the new DHET bursary fund. But that announcement did not deal with the missing middle. That's why we are still coming back to the same problem. There were also lots of inputs that were done through to the HEHA Commission. In fact, Chair, I would suggest, by the way, that it would not be a waste of time for the Portfolio Committee just to request for a briefing on the main findings and recommendations of the HEHA Commission, so that you yourselves can familiarize yourself with what was contained there, because it was a very extensive process. So this will make our work easier now when we then are looking into this matter of student funding comprehensively, because we'll really be building on information that is already there. I had already asked the department that I have a one-person task team just to pull together all this and come up with a proposal. But now, of course, now that Cabinet has backed it up, which is a very important step, this time that government is supporting this, then it will make it easier for us to actually come up with a very firm proposal. Inevitably, that will mean some kind of loan scheme, which may have a mix of incentives with bursary features, like USAf was actually trying to do. So I just thought it's very important that, and also Honorable Letsie is right. And MPs have a duty, because Parliament passes the budget, have a duty to say, we can't just be, yes, we do need to support university students. You do need to increase the number of Black and women students. You need to improve their participation rate. But at the same time, with fiscal challenges, let's not continuously be taking every cent that we can identify only into university students when we have got unemployed youth, when we have got targets to train artisans through the TVET college system, which is as equally, if not more demanding, given the fact that we've got 3 to 4 million youth who are neither in education or in employment or in training. I am glad, Honorable Letsie, because I think that the Portfolio Committee has got a very important contribution to make itself. How do we strike this balance? Because I can tell you, almost for every student at university, he or she has left at home an unemployed brother or sister or cousin who is not in education, not in employment, not in training. Honorable Mkhatshwa, I think the NSFAS can answer better on the issue of laptops as to where we are. I also wish to announce here that I am working with the University of Zululand to undertake a comprehensive study on the challenges that cause instability each year at our universities. We know some of them, but I want to go deeper also and look into this issue of security on our campuses through this study, because it's important that we reflect on that, all aspects of it. The role of private security, you know, the police, and so on, from the standpoint of the institutions. Honorable Mananiso, yes, collection of data is very important. I'm continuing with that. We may not have all the data into its finest details, but I hope by the end of the week, it should be able at least to broadly indicate who owes, what categories of students are owed, because it's not the same kinds of students that are actually owed. Honorable Macase, the families with 3 kids, and NSFAS can explain that, because as government, we amended policy to say those parents who are earning beyond the 350,000 limit, if they've got more than 2 kids, they can actually appeal for help from NSFAS. Unfortunately, we don't have compulsory education beyond 18 years. Even now, our compulsory education, if I'm not mistaken, goes up to grade 9, if I'm not mistaken. But Dr. Lewin may know that better. There is no compulsory education beyond that. Nor have we ever contemplated compulsory education beyond that, because that's expensive, and also there are people who can afford. Honorable Muma, I won't call you Mkacho, though we are Mkacho, because then I confuse you with Honorable Nombendulo Mkacho, or I'll say Zwid. Both of you are. I am as concerned as you are. Every year, it's like a soapy now, you know, the bold and the beautiful. Every beginning of the year, there is instability. Partly that's why I'm doing this study with the University of Zululand. Partly that's why I hope that this time around, if we can settle the issue of the missing middle, then we should go a long way in ensuring that every year starts peacefully and we focus on teaching and learning rather than focusing on other things. I really am hoping in the end we will actually confront this. Now, you say government likes bailouts. I will ask Dr. Lewin to tell you that in my earlier stint as Minister of Higher Education and Training, we did settle debt for NSFAS owing students. In the old system, I can't remember which year, and also Minister Pando did it within the last 2 years, between 2017 and 2018 and 2019. Also gave a debt relief to your pre-2018 NSFAS student. I had done that myself earlier. I can't remember which year. So we have done a bailout. We have done a bailout for NSFAS owing students. And we ended up settling that to say, your pre-2018 NSFAS students, they must be allowed then to register, even if they owe, provided they sign acknowledgement of debt, so that they can pay when they are actually working. Chair, you are raising also a matter that's at the heart of the matter.
Hello, can you hear me?
How do we ensure that in funding NSFAS, we don't end up defunding the higher education system? Because that will be counterproductive, which means we will increase funding to students into a system that increasingly will not be able to meet their needs and their expectations. I'm glad if the portfolio committee is raising this matter. In fact, I would urge that the portfolio committee be seized with that matter. The issue of increased funding for NSFAS, but increasing underfunding of the rest of the system, because you are creating problems. If the system is being underfunded, then you're going to have an increase in failure rates and dropout rates, which means there's even more wastage now, even by government in funding students. Yes, I have received the letter of demands, by the way, from the TVET sector, and we are looking into their matters, because we want to engage everyone around what they want to achieve. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I think on my side, that's where I could end. If there are any important matters that I had left, the rest of the time, Dr. Lewin, I'm told she's there. She can be able, our acting DDG for university education, to answer this. Otherwise, Comrade Chair. Oh, the DM, I'm told also. Sorry, DM. I'm told that you are there as well. So the DM Chair will be able to answer. Thanks, Chair, for your kind consideration of my situation.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think that was, excuse me, that was very helpful. I think the response did cover quite a number of issues raised by the members, and I think you did well to the discussion. Let's release you to attend to other matters that you've apologized for. We will continue. Thank you very much, Minister. We will then continue with the responses by the stakeholders. And then at the end, we will come back to the department, and then the department will get the last bite, and then we will summarize. So we will start from the end with the SRC of Wits. Then we will go to Wits University, and then to SAUS, and to what else? USAf. I see the president of Wits is in and out. It's possible that he might be having some difficulty in connectivity. We keep on admitting him onto the platform, and he gets out, he comes back. So I don't know whether the president, you are here, are you able to give out your final comments on the discussions?
Hello. Sorry, I am in the meeting. Sorry, I had a data issue. I mean a network issue.
Yeah, so we will allow you to give your concluding comments as the
yes. Thank you.
Take the other stakeholders.
Thank you for the opportunity. But more than anything, I want to speak largely to our registration crisis on campus. I think most of you would have been aware by now that we've tried raising money, and we've raised about 4 million rands thus far. To be exact, is 3.6 million rands, I think. So, and the university had advanced that there's only 3% of the numbers, and the numbers have been quite a sketchy topic throughout our deliberations in these meetings. And we've since said, okay, fine, we will take the university's submission of 3% as is, on condition that we will give them the 3 million, all of it without question or anything. We give it to them and they allow everyone to register. As and when time proceeds, we will try and raise more money to cover up for those who our money is not enough to cover for at this point. But in the event that it's only 3% of the university, my estimation is to say at this point, the money we've raised should at least come close to what is required by the university to allow these students to register. And then second, on the students who were said to be allowed to register by the university, the hardship applicants. So there's another fund we have called the SRC Hardship Fund. Those students are still unable to register at this point, and they are still without a access to higher education in the form of it being online at this point. So they can't access anything at this point in time. So as among our closing comments, we want to prioritize the issue of registration. Can it be that Wits University at least sends out communication to all students to say, look, they are going to be allowed to register, and we are more than willing to give all the money we've raised to them so that these students are able to register, rather than us allocating the money on an individual basis as per the student who've applied to our fund. And then lastly, I think I would want to speak to the issue of access and suspension letters of SRC members. There are SRC members, 2 of them, who have been suspended and are unable to access campus without the express permission of university officials. And this hinders them in many regards from not only participating in their SRC duties, but also from participating in their academic activities. So, and I would want for that to be addressed in this meeting. And then lastly, as it regards police brutality and how public order policing is dealt with in our country, I would want to submit before the committee that we request that rubber bullets and guns in particular not be used going forward, because we've seen what they did to Andries Tatane, we've seen what they've done to Thokoza Sintumba, and the traumatic experience that comes with that is one I think no one should undergo. So we request a ceasefire of some sort, and we hope the committee will motivate for us to the rest of cabinet and parliament to say, look, we request a ceasefire of some sort in this regard. Those will be my only points as it regards our last comments. I don't want to be long. I just want us to focus largely on the issue of registration, because the academic year is moving and it's moving really fast. Registration has been closed and the university is yet to communicate whether it will be extending registration to those who will benefit from our fund, or it will not be doing so at all. So, and the academic year, most of us have lost the academic year, and by us I refer to the students who can't register. Have lost the academic year, and I request that we take somewhat of an approach that considers these individuals who are still unable to register. And I hope before this meeting ends, we will have some commitments from the university being pronounced today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. Thanks for your closing comments. And in fact, I think I should have asked the university to start so that if there's anything, you can also comment. But they've been with us here from last week today. So we will ask them to respond to the questions raised by members as well as the SRC. But yeah, thank you very much, President, for your closing comments. Vice Chancellor Vilakazi.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me the time just to give my closing remarks as well. I'm also cognizant of time, so I'll be respectful in terms of not going through each and every point in detail, because some of the answers have been partially addressed by the Minister. And I'll just add first the SRC undertaking, and I should acknowledge as a university that, and appreciate the effort that the SRC, working with the Dean of Student Affairs, have put forward in starting what is a pioneering effort of raising funds. To which end, the university put forward what is called the VC COVID Fund of 10 million rand to cover, among others, to augment what is the hardship fund. And I do make an undertaking to the SRC and to the people of South Africa is that we will be flexible with regards to the remaining number of students that need to be registered. In actual fact, I did instruct the Dean of Student Affairs and the registrar to continue over the weekend, the long weekend, with the registration process. Just in terms of numbers as well, is that, as you mentioned, numbers are dynamic, like a speedometer of a car. At the beginning of the year, we set with a number of around 1,300 or thereabouts of the students. That was effectively what was remaining. And those numbers, as we've been continuing with the registration process, have dynamically shifted. Others have applied to other institutions as well, taken offers there. But these numbers have shifted to the fact that now, as of today, we are actually remaining with a list that the SRC and the Dean of Student Affairs are reconciling. So that minutiae of the conversation, I will leave it to the Dean to actually elaborate on. But we should certainly, by the end of the day or tomorrow, have closed the process, and then we will actually ensure that we cover that aspect. I think in as far as you raised the issue, Chair, of 6,000 people, I think let me just put it on record and clarify and correct that number. This is a cumulative number. As a university, we do keep a record of who's in, who's out over a particular period, and it stays within our record-keeping mechanism for accountability to the department. So that number is a historical number of individuals who failed, who didn't progress academically over many years. It's cumulative. It's not the 2020 number into 2022, into 2021. And they may be in formal employment, may have left Wits years ago and moved to other universities, or others might have emigrated to other countries. And this number is kept as a record because the university does not have the recourse to chase after people when they owe an amount of money. And secondly, to repeat, is that we have addressed current year applications in partnership with the SRC through the COVID hardship fund in accordance with qualifying criteria. That takes into account the fact that people do not earn more than R1 million, because we've seen a few cases of individuals who are trying to jeopardize the system by putting their name forward and and their parents can even afford a holiday elsewhere. So just that basically just put on record, and I'm prepared because of the limitations of time to put that also as a written submission to this committee. On the suspension, 2 students disrupted an exam. It was a CTA accounting exam, or test rather, assessment, which are very, very important for 4th year accounting students to qualify. That was on the 8th of March, and the examination scripts were torn. This infringes on the rights of others to write the exams without interference. It is a responsibility of the university to ensure both its management and accountability cuts across the entire system, that we all operate under the same fiduciary responsibility. The right to protest does not mean that one should infringe on another individual's future effectively. So that is the kind of fiduciary responsibility the university have, not only to the student representatives but also to the broader student body. The students were given a suspension order, which I have to note does not preclude them from continuing with the academic program. None of the suspensions have got anything to do at all with the protest that took place on campus. The SRC was allowed to converge at the matrix and organize themselves, but they don't undertake this into a game of who said, she said. The SRC members have been allowed to remain in residences and can participate in many of their programs that are associated with the SRC and the academic program. And that is on record, and I will put that as a written submission. Having said that, I do take what the member of this committee, Honorable Mkhajo, says. As someone who just started this job two months ago, I've learned my lessons, and I hope that you all learn our lessons. And I think everyone here in this committee has bemoaned the fact that this is becoming almost, someone used a case of Bold and the Beautiful, is a case of every time there is this conflict, we end up in this situation. I think, I hope that now with this fresh perspective that I have with my new management team, is that we need to rethink ourselves as a university community. There have been lessons that have been learned, and detour to the student representatives as well, to work around means of conflict management and resolution. I look forward to the suggestions that have been put forward by Honorable Mkhajo around, what kind of interventions we can do to allow for mediation, to allow for conflict resolution and management of a crisis, because we are all in this together. And that doesn't apply to Wits, by the way. It applies to all other universities. Finally, on NSFAS, I know it's a generic issue, and it did mention earlier, Mr. Chair, that NSFAS is a generic issue, and some of the issues you asked about Wits are no longer about Wits issues, but they're national. But I can just share with you how we are responding to the NSFAS situation. Our response to NSFAS, and I'm going to be closing in a short while, is that last year we were able to bridge that funding owing to the cash flow situation of last year, that earlier this year we allowed, and the CFO can correct, can confirm rather, we allowed students who are in the NSFAS category to enroll, and also to, so that they can start the academic program whilst we're waiting for money from National Financial Student Aid to come through. Regarding the missing middle, and again, it's not a permanent solution, the so-called missing middle, for want of a better word, is that the university is starting a major, what is called centenary campaign to raise funds, to fundraise, along basically what the SRC has put as one of the initiatives, but on a much larger scale over a sustainable period of time, to ensure that we cover as much as we can. Some of the students who in particular are passing well, but fall within the, just the cusp of qualifying for NSFAS, and also not being able to access NSFAS grant funding because they are just above the threshold, which is where the critical point needs to be, where we need to really sharpen our focus of ensuring that we deal with that in a sustainable way. And obviously, that cannot be done by Wits alone. because the funding is a function of whoever gives you the funding. I think, Chair, I'm prepared to put a written submission. I'm cognizant of the limitations of time, but I just thought I'd just give you kind of 4 high-level responses. And as you correctly said earlier on, that we should be solutions-oriented. And I look forward to solutions that will come from here. And I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Vice Chancellor Vilakazi, thanks for your, I think it is quite pleasing that you you do acknowledge that there is a need to learn lessons from whatever disagreements that happened during the registration process. And we do acknowledge and accept your commitment to be flexible in accommodating the students who are still yet to register. I think that's a very fresh perspective that you are offering to us, and it's welcomed. Because really the idea is to see how we resolve the problem, move away from the rigid positions that we sometimes take, and be flexible within the limitations of the budgets that are there. I think we'd like to thank you very much. It's a good thing that you do. We all learn. Every day is a lesson. So somebody said you even learn how to die for the first time in your life. So learning is a continuous process. So it's something that is a constant in our lives. We learn every day. So thank you for that, VC. We will appreciate your written response. I think we'll welcome it. Please do share with us your written response so that we can also follow up.
Thank you, Chair. I also like to send my, if I beg your indulgence, just slightly to say that I'll try to be here as long as I possibly can, but I will, I've got my team that will be present, but I'll try to be here as much as I can.
Okay, no, that's fine. We've got your responses. We'll welcome your written ones. I think
like the minister, I've been in a bad mood since Sunday as well, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine. Talking about that, I see there are comments on the platform. Maybe just to request that I see there's a comment by National In-Source Workers Union. Now, National In-Source Workers Union is not part of these engagements. You are part of the engagements with the CPUT. And so as a general rule, you are not allowed to participate. You are on the platform, but you are not allowed to participate in this discussion, either verbally or through this writing on the platform. So this platform is for the members to express themselves, and also in a limited form for our guests to communicate with us issues that they are not able to tell us verbally. So please desist from abusing us on the platform. Okay, let's move to SAUS.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I have 3 points, and my colleague Yandisa will just jump in shortly after. The first, I think I wanted to touch on what Honorable Letsie had brought up regarding the missing middle, and perhaps maybe to expand for the committee through their considerations around how we have systemically created an issue of accumulating student debt in the sector. Because the government or the minister will come forward and say that, yes, free education is being dispersed for those who are coming from a household income of below 350,000 Rand per annum. Now, you know, a student who then comes from a household income of 351, for instance, 351,000, meaning that 1,000 Rand above the particular threshold, that student cannot get funding from higher education. But the argument we're making as students is that there is no fundamental difference between a student coming from 350,000 Rand per annum and 351,000 Rand per annum. So we systemically create an issue of the missing middle, right? So the next step would be the minister to say that we have covered NSFAS, but now we have an issue in our universities where a large pool of students who fall outside of this particular threshold, but who are still too poor for education, what we require as the missing middle, cannot afford to enter universities on the basis of finances, right? Now, if we're to break down this thing a bit further, Chairperson, this is 350,000 per annum is somebody coming from a household income of 29,000 Rand per month, committee members. Now, on 29,000 per month, we are saying that perhaps government ought to be having engagement. The governing party must enter into engagements of increasing its definition of what it considers to be poor and the missing middle in this particular country. As students, we've been very, very clear that our definition goes as far as 600,000 Rand. That is informed by the fact that, for instance, if we're to take somebody who earns R1 million per annum, and that particular person, after deduction, after tax of 40%, after various deductions, will take home about 50,000 Rand per annum. The argument we're making is that that particular individual still cannot afford higher education in this country, which has been costed to be around 100,000, including of accommodation. That particular individual would not be able to afford the living expenses, the bonds, the vehicles, the houses, and so forth, taking care of the household on that salary alone. That is 500,000 per annum. Now we're saying that the 350,000 threshold creates a systemic challenge of a missing middle. Students have identified that even on particular brackets of income would still not be able to afford higher education in this country. But yet we still come here and say that we've resolved the challenge by responding to the issue of 350 threshold, a 350 figure which has not changed or increased in line with inflation, in line with other particular economic constraints and considerations over the last 3 years. So we're saying that the 350 figure is actually quite dishonest, and it excludes a number of students in the process who desperately do not have funding for higher education. The 14% increment of VAT to 15% was meant to cover for this particular shortfall. Instead, the minister is saying that the money that has been made available to NSFAS, Chairperson, is coming from they've taken money from the TVET infrastructural grant and the National Skills Development Levy in order to cover the particular shortfall in NSFAS. Now, we're saying as students, of course, that while this looks like it's an immediate achievement, we're creating a situation whereby next year we'll say that the TVET sector will not be able to have infrastructure development because here we are hearing the minister saying that they've taken money from the TVET infrastructure, from the National Skills Development Levy to fund the issue of the shortfall in NSFAS. Whereas the real issue here is that we have a Minister of Finance, for instance, who cuts budgets from higher education, and members of this particular committee adopt those budgets in Parliament. So it is not a secret that we've adopted the budget. Meanwhile, students have been saying that you've cut 24 billion Rand from higher education, you've cut 7 billion Rand from NSFAS. We're coming into these particular meetings and we're saying that the issue is funding, but we're approving budgets that cut funding from higher education. So we really need to create a serious overlook in terms of how do we deal with the issue of student debt in the country, which is an accumulating crisis. The last 2 points, Chairperson, is that it's unfortunate the vice president spoke before the VC because now there's an inconsistency on their part. The vice president raised an issue that a number of the SRC2 in particular have been suspended as a result of the protest action. The VC of Vets is coming and saying that those two students were not suspended as a result of protest action, which is not true. The examination that is referring to is an examination that was disrupted by protesters on the basis that students were being excluded from registering at the university. So he's being dishonest in saying that those students are not suspended as part of the protest, whereas that is the case. And the SRC is pleading with this committee to resolve that those particular suspensions be uplifted. And then the last but not least, Chairperson, is to say that we really need to lobby this committee to sympathize with students, to say that the issue of the bailout, comrades, the issue of the bailout is a serious issue in the sector because, yes, the minister is correct in saying the former minister, Naledi Pandor, issued a bailout. It was a bailout of 1 billion Rand, but the estimated bailout that they have the data and they have told us to be the figure in the higher education sector is 13.7 billion Rand. So, and this covers NSFAS students who are outside of NSFAS. And when you cover this particular debt, all of these students will be able to have their academic records, will be able to find meaningful employment, which is our concern as students, as a student structure. I think, Chairperson, I'll leave it there for now, but my colleague Yandisa also had a few points that written down when I stepped outside. If through you, if you can just add 1 or 2 points, Chair.
Okay, let's allow it to add 1 or 2 points. You said, what's the name of your colleague?
It's Comrade Yandisa. I don't know if he's in, but it was supposed to be in.
Yes, okay. Yes, it's possible. Yes.
Okay, over to you. Is it Lubabalo?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, briefly, just 1 or 2 points.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I'm the national organizer of SAUS. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Lubabalo and Isanzuia. Unfortunately, Chair, we had raised our hand because we had wanted to register some of the points, but unfortunately at the time you are noting the MPs. So probably when our time comes as we become MPs, you will be noted as well in the future. But Chair, we must register some of the few points that were raised here by members of the committee, which of course they bring word to us. I hear the Honorable King speaking about the sustainability of NSFAS through the loan arrangement. We want to put on record it will be a crime if we not put that on record. That is SAUS. We want to reject that. We fought so hard in the Fees Must Fall to make sure that we deliver this free education, we deliver this free education. We can't have honorable members now wanting to reverse those gains in the name of sustainability. We want to reject that. But we must put it also on record that probably part of the delays that have been in the process is that the minister has refused to engage, or the minister actually has not been able to engage with the union. Even now, I'm very sad the fact that minister will address us and just leave without having to hear how we are going to then resolve. But we understand that we will be meeting the minister earlier this week. So we want as well, Chair, to register our point, continue to lobby this committee to say that we must put a motion in Parliament so that all other MPs get a take on the matter of saying that we must look at the way of intervening in this student debt. Because remember, if we are to increase our research output and our PhD holders, we need to make something about this debt that is growing, because student debt, so far things stands, is the fastest growing debt in the country, and we need to pay our focus to it if we want then to achieve this high number of PhD holders. Secondly, Chair, what the minister said was incorrect. We understand that there are gains that have been made with NSFAS. But there are traditional meetings that we will hold with NSFAS, traditional meetings we will hold with the minister at the beginning of the year to prepare for an academic year. But there has been a behavior of these comrades wanting not to engage now with student leaders, which becomes a problem, because there are some of the issues that are campus-based, where normally at the beginning of the year, we will have registrars, we will have officials from financial aid, and we have NSFAS in the meeting, facilitated by DHET, to deal with all the issues that are on campus. For an example, there are students who find that these students could have been registered, but when you call NSFAS, they will tell you that, no, we are waiting for a template from your institution. When you go to the institution, they tell us, no, we have given the template, but NSFAS is not funded. You realize that if we were to sit a meeting, these issues will have been ironed out immediately. It's not a matter of funding, but it's a matter of administration. So we want to urge all stakeholders to part of the engagements that we are trying to do. We've met USAf before, and we're going to meet USAf again. And we want to say, Chair, the Vice Chancellors must try by all means to work with us here, because we all understand that there's been a challenge with the previous academic year. So when we're saying students must be registered, we are not calling for something that is beyond. We're not shooting above the clouds here, but we want Vice Chancellors to work with us. For an example, I'm listening to the Vice Chancellor of Wits here. He is projecting that there are very low numbers of students that have not been registered, so they are doing progress. Now we're saying, if then the numbers are that low, what is wrong by saying we are opening registration for all students who have dent, because those numbers are low in any case. It won't be a dent if they register these students. So we want to put it on record that we are willing to engage with all stakeholders, but for as long as engagements are denied, we will have no choice, but to proceed with the shutdown. And we hope that, because we see how the committee is moving, how you are chairing the committee, we have hope in this committee that the interest of students will be carried forward. We want to believe that, as you've committed, that this is a progressive committee, portfolio committee, we want to make sure that all student interests are delivered, and we want to make sure that we work very well with you, Chair, as the portfolio chair, in making sure that we advance the interests of students. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Comrade Lubabalo. That would be the comments of SAUS. Let's move to USAf. Professor Bauer, I see your video is on. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and good morning, everybody, and good morning to the Deputy Minister and other colleagues. I want to first of all just thank you, Chair, for convening this meeting and for allowing us to have this conversation. I think it's an important conversation. I also have just a list of 4 quick things to respond to. I won't be long. The first one relates to an issue that was raised by Honorable Mkhatshwa relating to the instability in our system. And I want to agree with her, that actually it's almost kind of it's an annual event now. And at some universities, it's an event that happens twice a year. So it seems to me that we really have to deal with the core issues that produce this instability. And I think that in our meeting with the minister last week, we did arrive, I think, at a way of moving this forward. The key issues are, in fact, the issue around student funding, and the other side, it's the issue of student accommodation. Those 2 issues have been the lasting kind of challenges that our institutions face. And on the student funding issue, I think it seems to me that we are dealing with this year in an ad hoc fashion again. And I want to agree with many of the members of parliament present who indicated that we're just kicking the can down the road. But at the same time, I think what we did agree with the minister was that he would kind of take the lead in putting together a national process to address the issue of student funding to produce a more sustainable, long-lasting solution. And I think that we must really aim for a long-lasting solution, that we don't end up every year sort of at the point where we are at the moment. And I think that clearly we have to take into account the constraints on the national fiscus and all of that, but we do need a solution. And I'll come back to that in a little while. Several, including yourself, Chair, several members of the Portfolio Committee raised the issue around why is it that the institutions that are wealthier than the others are less keen to work with the issue of registering students. And I just want to emphasize that all 26 universities have programs in place to address the issue for this year. And I think that you just have to remind yourself, I think that there's a long history of experience at the historically disadvantaged institutions and the universities of technology, where this has been going on for decades, if you like. And that it's a new phenomenon to some extent for some of our universities. But I have to emphasize that actually all 26 universities have programs in place this year, as you heard from Professor Belagazi. And the same is true for the other historically advantaged institutions. So it's not, for me, it's not really an issue this year. But what I want to emphasize really is that the solution that we've adopted for this year, as has been pointed out by SAUS and others, is not a solution. What we are doing is really just ensuring that we are threatening the universities as going concerns, if you like, and this is something that's deeply worrying. And clearly, some institutions are closer to a financial crisis, if you like, than others are. But I think we have to accept that we can't carry on in this way if universities are meant to be going concerns. And we have to remind ourselves that there's no provision in the Higher Education Act for any kind of bailouts, if you like, from the universities that are in crisis. So university councils and university vice chancellors and so on have to ensure that their institutions, that they have the responsibility to ensure that their institutions are going concerns. The spokesperson for Mr. Shingange of SAUS kind of pointed out, in fact, that this is my third point, pointed out that there is an impact on the funding of higher education and the TVT sector because of the shortfall for NSFAS this year. And I think that we just have to understand that there'll be cuts in infrastructure grants, not just to the TVT sector, but also to the universities. There'll be cuts to possibly to the subsidy program, although we hear from the department that they are trying to protect the subsidy. There are cuts to the research funding because of cuts to the Department of Science and Innovation, which through the NRF funds research. And of course, as we heard last week from Mr. Shongwe, there's also significant cuts in funding from external sources to the university. So it seems to me at least that we have to think about this in a more systemic way. And what I would like to just kind of refer to here is a point made by Mr. Lepsia, which is that we have to think of higher education and science as areas of kind of investment rather than areas of expenditure. You're investing in talented young people, but you're also investing in the economy and so on, because the graduates, the products of universities, both the research and the teaching outputs, if you like, they feed into the economy. So we have to think of these as kind of investments rather than as expenditures, and that might change the way in which we think about this challenge we face. And finally, Chair, I'd like to respond to a question from Honorable King around the issue of blended learning, and I think that there were two parts to a question. The one was, to what extent does this affect the quality of education? And I think that from the reports that we have from universities, there's been very positive kind of responses, but it's a bit early at this point for us to have a rigorous idea about the impact of blended learning on quality. And we have a project which we are working on at the together in partnership with the Council on Higher Education from our teaching and learning strategy group at USAf, which is looking at this analysis at the impact of blended learning on remote learning, blended learning, and other forms of learning on quality. And the second part of her question was, what does this mean for employment? And at this point in time, I think we just have to understand that blended learning is not online learning. It's really a mixture of using technology and engaging in face-to-face learning. And that doesn't change necessarily the staffing structure. This doesn't need the change in the staffing structure of universities. So there's at this point in time, there's no impact on the employment of universities. Yes, I'll stop there. Thanks, Chair, and I'd like to thank you again for convening this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Bauer, for being part of the meetings last week and this week. We really appreciate that, representing USAf. The point we're making about the introduction of a multimodal system of learning and teaching, we've already discussed that, and we've got a view that we need to have an assessment presented by the department, probably working with other stakeholders in the system, in the university space, of what are the lessons that are learned, that we can learn from the introduction of this blended system of learning and teaching, which were occasioned by COVID-19. So we are saying we're yet to learn. So we think that we can have a discussion as to what are the lessons, what are the levels of success that we have registered across the system as a result of the introduction of a multimodal system of learning and teaching, which of course, as we know, it was a sort of an emergency kind of an arrangement because no one was prepared for COVID. So we had to learn as we were moving along. So we would want to have that discussion. We've already agreed. The department, I'm sure they are working on it at some point. They will then brief us. Can we move to, let's have NSFAS and then hand over to the department. I don't know whether Thandi will want to say something before the Deputy Minister comes. I saw the CFO Andile here on the platform. Andile, do you want to respond to the questions that were raised on NSFAS? Over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon to the honorable members, and also to the guests of the committee, and the DM and the colleagues from the department. Chair, I would cover the question that was directed as to when are we paying, and I'm only just going to talk to universities as the chair guided earlier. Chair, we have in the communication we've sent to institutions indicated that we would pay all allowances on 3 days after we receive our allocation from Treasury and or the department. And as Chair, we specifically said 3 days after because we can't, or at least on our part, control the exact date. But our commitment has been that, Chair. Chair, Honorable Lithier raised issues around the fact that NSFAS needs to resolve student issues, and I think it's also one area that Honorable King raised, Chair. Chair, in as far as continuing students are concerned, we have communicated to institutions around these students to be registered. There are, Chair, about 17,000 students, approximately 17,000 students that could not, and I'm specifically talking to continuing students that cannot be registered. These, Chair, fall into the following. These students fall into these categories, Chair. There are about 6,300 of that number who are registered in the qualifications that are legacy qualifications with institutions that cannot be funded. What we have done is we took that list and sent it to the specific institutions, requesting them to register students on qualifications that can be funded. The other students, Chair, relate to students that were funded by NSFAS, and we have found that the family circumstances, according to SAUS, are reflecting a different kind of data. What we've also done with this list of students, Chair, we have alerted institutions that to please look at these students while we are resolving this issue. But what we've had to say is that should the results indicate that the students are not funded, then we can't guarantee those students we have paid. But what we've tried to do proactively is to inform institutions around these particular students. We have, Chair, I've been tracking this personally. We have given ourselves up to the 25th to clear these issues to the extent that they are in our control as NSFAS. Chair, in terms of, maybe I'll link this to the question the Chair asked in terms of how many students are funded, Chair. I'll talk to the global number, Chair. About 813,000 approximately students that applied. These are new intakes, Chair, that applied to NSFAS. We have, Chair, indicated to 719,000 students that they are eligible for NSFAS funding. There's about 27,906 students who we are waiting for them to submit supporting documents. Chair, I must add that these supporting documents are documents that we cannot get another verification source to verify. For example, there were students that we are waiting for ID copies, and we also are waiting for household payslips. Those we were able to clear through verification with the Department of Affairs. and also with SAUS. So these are the missing documents that we can't verify through any other third source. These students have been sent communication by us to submit that information, and we continually submit that. And Chair, there are about in total 89,570 students that were found to not meet the requirements. So far, Chair, in terms of the students, we have received about, these are still new students, about 58,000 records or students registrations. And then we are still awaiting for 630,584 to be received based on the numbers that were eligible for funding, Chair. Chair, in terms of the challenges of NSFAS, we are continuously working on resolving these Chair. These challenges that have been raised. The issue, Chair, of have we considered to deploy resources at institution? I'm going to leave out, Chair, in that I think perhaps Tandy will cover it, because this is a matter that is also being explored as part of the ministerial task team. And Chair, the Chair also asked around the appeals, particularly for new applicants. Chair, we received 11,329 appeals from continuing students. We have approved 4,827 of those appeals. There are about 1,706 that are waiting for supporting documents. 2,964 were rejected or not successful. 121 were withdrawn. And as of Thursday last week, 1,711 were still those from the minister's response, Chair. I picked up that there was a question on laptops. Chair, we are in progress with this as reported to the committee. We are expecting the first batch of laptops to arrive on the 18th of April. We have set up, or we are in the process of setting up task teams with the TVET colleges and also with the universities separately. The point of these task teams, Chair, is to discuss and set out priority lists in terms of student needs. In those task teams, Chair, we've made provision for institutions and the student bodies to also be represented. That's the update, Chair, I can give. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andile, for the responses. Can we get Tandy and then the DM? Tandy, are you on the platform?
I'm here.
All right, over to you.
Afternoon, Chair, honourable members. If it's okay with them, I'll try and answer some of the questions and then you can come in. Minister had referred to a number of issues and then asked for me to provide clarity on those. And I think both Prof. Bauer and Andile have addressed some of the issues that I was going to talk to. Maybe just to indicate that the Minister, when talking about the NSFAS state of qualifying students, had mentioned previous rounds of dealing with that debt. And just to clarify that in 2013 and 2016, and again in 2019, this matter was addressed. In 2019, the matter was addressed by the former Minister Pandor, and an amount of 1.7 billion was transferred to NSFAS to deal with that. Part of it was part of the due diligence process that had taken place following the announcement of the new DHET bursary at the end of 2017. And some of that funding, that process is still underway between NSFAS and institutions, although much of it has been addressed. And some of that funding is there to also manage students who qualify, who were registered in 2018, to allow them to conclude through the system. That's particularly students where there's a funding cap, and is obviously dependent on the funding that's available through that process. Minister also referred to a ministerial task team that that work was done in 2016. That report was produced in 2016, and it resulted in the development of a pilot process, which was entitled SFAP, the ICUSASA Student Financial Aid Program. And that process has resulted in an organization that is addressing some missing middle funding issues. However, maybe just to also indicate that I think what I didn't hear the minister saying is that we have resolved all the student funding issues in the system at all. I think that what he was saying is that in terms of the policy commitments that government has made in terms of poor and working class students, that those commitments have been met. But there is by no means a or ignorance or ignoring of the fact that we have many, many other issues to deal with, and that there are students who struggle to afford higher education. Also that we do need to look at what it means to afford higher education, and whether we talk about students as missing middle or poor and working class, what do we mean by that? What does it cost families to access higher education? All of these issues need to be addressed as part of the policy review, which needs to address the issues from 2022 onwards, but also to address the long-term issues around student funding. And that is the work that the minister has referred to, that the department is commencing with now. I wouldn't say commencing with, because some of the work has been ongoing and there are aspects of the work that are already underway. But there is a need for a very intensive process at this point to ensure that we meet the cabinet deadline. And there are many, many issues that are part of that, including identifying the needs of students, but also looking at a number of policy issues. And maybe to mention that one of those policy issues relates to a matter that was raised about where families have more than one student in a post-school environment, and what that means for a family who's earning 350. Those are all policy issues. The issue that Thabo had raised around the threshold and how one adjusts the threshold and what it means to do so, on what basis, all of those issues need to be addressed as part of this policy review. Just in terms of the issues that were raised, yes, just in terms of the issue about NSFAS and the Ministerial Committee of Inquiry, which has concluded its work, it is an issue about the future of NSFAS and how it engages. And maybe I think what is becoming better understood as we talk in more detail about the work that NSFAS does, and the fact that we have this ecosystem of funding and the role that the universities and the TVET colleges play, is that it is really important at institutional level to have people at institution level who are able to engage with students directly, where students can go to those people and actually get answers when it comes to issues of funding, and particularly NSFAS funding. And I think that we've discussed this before during the period of administration, where one of the concerns we had was that students, during the period that we moved onto the so-called student-centered model, students were not able to easily access NSFAS information from university campuses. But what has happened in the last 2 years is that relationship between institutions and NSFAS has strengthened enormously, and we've seen the data exchange improving. We've seen the support that financial aid officers and other parts of the institutions are able to offer to NSFAS is quite significant. And perhaps it's something that's worth acknowledging, that the role that institutions play in supporting financial aid and funding to students, whether it's NSFAS students or other students, is not always acknowledged, but it is a very critical aspect of our student financial aid system, that institutions are able to engage directly with students and provide support and information to them. So in the long term, this is an issue that we need to address as part of how NSFAS operates and how institutions operate. And the ministerial committee hopefully would provide some recommendations in that regard. In terms of the issues of debt and debt profile, just to say that I think Prof. Bauer actually answered this, that I did want to also maybe indicate that it is quite a complex issue, that there are institutions that are differently, have different financial profiles. However, it's quite a complex set of issues, and the differences really are from one campus to another. So almost all of our universities are highly dependent on their two main income sources, which is tuition fees and the state subsidy. And so changes to any of those sources of income impact almost all our universities in different ways. And that while there may be some institutions that have a slightly lower dependence on tuition fees, there are those that are heavily dependent on NSFAS funding. But in all cases, our universities are very heavily reliant on state support, whether it's through state support for tuition fees or through the state subsidy. So that's quite a complex issue, but maybe what the minister was talking about is that we have engaged with institutions. We are hoping to get a much more in-depth profile of the debt situation at our institutions and how that debt is made up, and who owes that debt and over what period of time, and therefore to be able to look at what can be done about it. And then just on the two other issues, Chair, just to, again, Prof. Bauer addressed the issue of blended and online learning and what we have learned from the time of the pandemic and the 2020 academic year, what we are learning going forward. And the department is obviously very keen and working particularly with USAf and the CHE on understanding better how the 2020 year went, but also how this year is going and what institutions are doing, what innovations are being put in place, what kind of work is necessary, how do we understand the effects of some of these shifts on institutions. And I think also importantly, there is sometimes a misunderstanding on what it costs. What does it actually cost institutions last year to move onto an emergency remote platforms? What kind of things had to be done in terms of strengthening learning management systems and training for academic staff? What was the effect of that? And also, if you really are looking at, blended learning environments, what does that mean for academic staff? There's this assumption that somehow you need fewer, face-to-face interactions or fewer people, when actually that's not necessarily the case. So we're very keen to work very closely with USAf and the CHE on that. And we have done some work on student access to learning materials, which I think we need to expand on, particularly looking at the experiences of academic staff. And then the other issue that we're also keen to work more closely with USAf on, and there is some work going on this, is around the issue of security on campuses, and how campuses are able to deal with protest situations, and some of the issues that student leadership have raised. So we are also, I know that USAf has done some work in that area, and we will continue that discussion as well as the department. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kandi, for the responses. We are keen to receive that briefing on the lessons that were learned during the introduction of the multimodal system of learning and teaching. We were with UniZulu, I think last week or 2 weeks back. They've got an interesting way on how they deliver the learning materials to all their students, which was a process that involved the academic staff. Each of their academic staff members was involved in making sure that they deliver the learning materials to their students so that they can continue to learn. So we'll be interested in what other institutions did, so we will have that discussions. I think you said USAf and CHE will also help there. We're looking forward to that discussion. The Deputy Minister Manamela.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think firstly both Minister and Thandi went at length in responding to some of the issues that have been raised. And I think what at least on my part, just an emphasis that we are obviously looking forward to the engagements with the student union. We are aware that some of the some of the institutions have been able to engage with, and as per the report from USAf, some of the institutions have been able to resolve at least part of the challenges that they've been confronted with. And we're hoping that from our meeting with SAUS, we should be able to finally resolve the demands that they have forwarded to us. In fact, we believe that most of the issues that they have raised have actually been resolved, and that will be able to return to normality. And I think we also really appreciate the role that the portfolio committee is playing in ensuring that we are able to deal with with these particular issues. So I think just on my part, those 2 points, that we want to engage with SAUS and really appreciate the role that you've been playing, Chair, and the portfolio committee. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I think let me take this opportunity to thank all of you on the platform, honorable members, the Deputy Minister and the Minister in absentia, and all our stakeholders for making time to have these discussions. I think they were very fruitful discussions. The Minister did apologize that in terms of our original plan, we were supposed to meet at 9 and conclude at 12 o'clock. So as a result of that, he did indicate that he planned his diary around our schedule. So unfortunately, we had to move beyond 12 because initially we had to accommodate him. He was in a special cabinet meeting. So that's why we agreed with him that it's fine. He can take the responses before all the other stakeholders can comment, so that we can release him to attend to other matters. So it's a matter that he was raised with us at the beginning. So maybe just to clarify that point, I think from where we are all sitting, we now have a clearer understanding of what are the challenges, and we can categorize them. And already there are emerging solutions to some of the problems. Some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term. I think we note that in as far as the current policy of government of funding students from the working class and the poor, that commitment has been fulfilled. There is financial commitments to fulfill that policy pronouncements. We also note that there are difficulties with regard to those students who fall outside of the threshold that has been determined of 350,000 per annum. Those students who are referred to as the missing middle. There is still a vacuum in terms of policy from the side of government or the institutions. And I think the point that has been made by a number of stakeholders, including USAf and the student, is that there is a need for a national plan to address the students who fall outside of the NSFAS threshold. And which is a point that the minister is saying that they are working on. We welcome that currently there is an initiative to try and profile and to understand exactly what the issues are so that the department can go back to cabinet with a comprehensive response, which will seek to try and come up with solutions. They may involve a combination of loans and so forth to those kind of students. But it's an issue that the government is working on. There is a deadline of June for that work to be finalized and to be presented to cabinet. And hopefully after cabinet discussions, we ourselves at the portfolio committee, we would like to engage with the department on the outcomes of that work. The third issue I think that we must note is the question of the historic debt of students. It's a debt which somebody here commented that keeps on rising. For now, we know that it's around 14 billion of accumulated debt in the system, debt that is owed to the universities by the students. We also take note that the minister has indicated that there are attempts to try and profile this debt, who is owing, how much, which institution, the profile of the students, so that government can look at ways of trying to address the debt. I think that we welcome, because I think we all have to agree. I think it's a point that was made by Honorable Litsi, that there might be students in the system who are able to pay whatever outstanding amount that they are owing because they are from well-to-do families. Not every student who's owing the university is not able to afford to pay. So that's why we welcome the initiative to try and profile so that there's an understanding of who owes and how much and what could be the government's intervention with regard to the debt. Because it is an albatross on the neck of the institutions. I mean, year after year, this debt keeps on growing. So if there are innovative ways of attending to the debt, I think it's a matter that government can look at. But society in general has to come to the party in order to address this debt. The current fiscal environment of government will not allow that. It's already constrained. You can't get additional money to attend to the debt. But there might be a way of mobilizing funding to attend to this debt. Some of the proposals have come from the students. Some proposals have come from the private sector. But it requires a combined effort to attend to the debt. I think we must congratulate the leadership of the students at Wits for raising the approximately 3.6 million that will assist the students to register. And let's encourage the Wits SRC as well as management to continue the discussions. I think it was quite refreshing for the Vice Chancellor to say we'll be flexible in accommodating the students' demand. That is a solid basis to work on going forward. That's why I'm saying it's refreshing, because it demonstrates a leadership that is not intransigent. It's a leadership that is not arrogant. It's a leadership that is beginning to listen to the voices of the students. So let's build on that platform. Let there be engagements between Wits and the student leadership to look at what is there on the table. The 3%, which the VC says keeps on changing, is fine, but we work on the base of the 3% that has not been registered. There's money that the students have raised. How can all the students be accommodated to register, those who are on the list of the SRC, so that they are allowed to register? We appreciate the contribution that the students have made. management is also going to come to the party in future to address the future funding demands for the students, for the missing middle students, through their is it the centenary celebration, the reason that will be undertaken for the centenary of Wits. But let's agree that the issues which are there, let them be attended to. The VC was saying access to the SRC is allowed. I think that is a good thing. There seem to be a point of divergence as to the 2 students who have been suspended. The VC says there was an issue about the exam which was disrupted. SAUS was saying it was as part of the demand for the students to be. So I think let's take it back to the stakeholders to have a discussion around that issue and see if there are possibilities of attending to that without necessarily us imposing a solution. It's a matter for engagement, I think, at an institutional level between the students and between the leadership of the institution. The other issue is NSFAS. And I hear Tandy, you're saying that the ministerial task team has concluded its work on the design functionality of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. We will also at some point get some engagement with that report. But I think what we have been seized with as a portfolio committee and NSFAS is to improve the efficiency of NSFAS to be able to execute its mandate. The CEO has identified a number of things, some of which is the system problem that are there in NSFAS, and there is an attempt to try and resolve that. So there are a whole host of issues that we have had an engagement with NSFAS to say, let's look at the efficiency. Let's look at how best we can improve the performance of NSFAS. The information that is at the institutional level and the information that is at NSFAS must be able to correspond. So we must work on that. You must make sure that the turnaround time, particularly of appeals, are attended to as quick as possible. Make sure that the student funding decisions are communicated to the students. Make sure that those students who are on the system where there is still some outstanding issue deal with, like in the case of Value University of Technology, where we did an oversight. So there are still continuing issues within NSFAS that the new leadership is dealing with. We have encouraged them that we will support you in dealing with these issues. For as long as the intention is to take the NSFAS performance to a higher level. As you know that over the past two years of administration, the situation was terrible there. The situation was not proper. We know from the audit outcomes that the performance was going down. That's why we're supporting the leadership to take the performance to the next level. I think we accept the proposal made by the minister that we need to get a briefing on the Hair Commission. Honorable King did raise where are the recommendations. So let's accept that at some point we'll create space for a briefing on what are the recommendations of the Hair Commission so that we build on that. some of the issues might have been overtaken by developments, but it's important that we understand where the problem is. The minister has made a request on the national shutdown. So that will be discussed between the ministry and the SAUS. I believe there is a meeting scheduled very soon to discuss that. And there is a clarion call by the student for the police to not to use rubber bullets or live ammunition during the student protest. I think it's a correct call that the students should make, that the students are making. And we will take up this with the portfolio committee on the police. I've seen a statement by the chairperson of the portfolio committee on police, where she was speaking very strongly against the use of excessive force by the police when they attend to the student protests, and we support her. And I'm gonna have a discussion with her with a view to having a joint portfolio committee to deal with these issues, because we can't, every time the students engage in legitimate protest, there is the use of force against them. So we will have to talk to that, but also wants to appeal to the student leadership. I think up to so far, the protests were properly managed, properly led by the student leadership. But please, let's continue to manage them like that. Let's not allow some elements to make sure that they delegitimize the protest by engaging in violence. I think let's continue to make that call to the students that please continue to engage in this disciplined protest. Let's not allow any other person to come and make sure that there is violence. Because if there is violence there, it can simply serve to sort of delegitimize the cause, that legitimate cause that you are fighting for. And lastly, there is an issue here which I think in our various way we're talking to it. The continued underfunding of higher education, or let's say post-school education and training, because we've got problems in the CET, we still have got problems in the TVET. So this underfunding continues to be a problem, and I think it's about time that we speak to it as a portfolio committee. I know Thabo was saying we approve the budget every year. But budget has got its own process. We do, of course, participate in that. But it comes as a balanced budget. And Parliament, for as long as I can remember, has not really amended the budget. Although there is a legislation that provides for Parliament to amend, which it's also a process on its own. It's quite a detailed process to amend the budget that was introduced by the Minister of Finance. We have not really done so. But I think it would be correct for us to call for no further underfunding of higher education or the PSET system, because it's really causing problems in the system. So I think it's a call that we must make. It's a call that we must continue to make, because it's something that affects the entire system, as the minister has explained, as other members here have explained, that the impact on the cards somewhere. I mean, for instance, this 6 billion or 6.7 billion, it's money that comes from the infrastructure rollout program in TVET will be affected by this. NSFAS is not going to continue to implement its programs of training of those young people who are outside of school, outside of employment. They are not going to be able to do that, and so forth and so forth. So there is impact in the system when there is this underfunding. And by the way, the underfunding is not 6.7 billion, it's over 24 billion. That has been reduced as expenditure in the higher education and training budget. So, so I think we must add our voice to that. But I think we had a good meeting. We had a good meeting overall. Let's encourage all the stakeholders, all the partners to continue to engage at an institution level. One observation which we are leaving this meeting without really getting a sense of how does that come about is that some of the institutions which are not well to do, they don't have the financial muscles. They are going some extra length in trying to accommodate, especially the registration of students, and increase their debt levels, of course. But we find that other institutions which are well to do, they don't take similar efforts. And we're yet to grapple with that question. But I think generally, we've had a good discussion. Let all the stakeholders continue to engage. Looking forward to the meeting of SAUS and the minister. Hopefully we can get a good announcement that the national shutdown has been lifted, that there's been some agreements between SAUS leadership and the minister. But yeah, I think overall, that's how we wrap up our meeting. I would like to thank everybody again for the continuation of the meeting. We would like to thank you, Deputy Minister, for your comments and for being with us until we wrap up the meeting. So we are done, members. The meeting is adjourned. I see, Tabo, you have written something very long here. I'm not able to read it now, but otherwise we'll engage outside of this platform. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Long live the chair.
Sorry, Chair, we have minutes.
Oh, is there minutes? Anele?
Yes,
Oh,
sorry,
my apologies. Okay, we had two parts to the discussion. We had this discussion, which was a continuation of last week. We were supposed to have a CPUT. Let me just briefly take you through what the CPUT has done. They've written us a letter to say that they won't be able to come to the portfolio committee. They had a council meeting on Saturday. They discussed our request. They still say the request is short notice. So we're having a problem there. The problem of a university that does not want to be held to account. And we know that the relationship between the students and management is not good. We had received a memorandum. The student had to march to Parliament to send us a memorandum. They continue to protest. There continue to be problems. And management is not responding properly. Instead, they unleashed the security people on the students. There are problems about the relationship. I mean, we had a joint submission by the unions where they are raising a number of problems with management. At the center of all these things are the Vice Chancellor.
What I have done is I have compiled the...
Okay, Honorable Litsie. Okay, so I think what is emerging as an issue is that the Vice Chancellor seemed to be not helpful. In the past, we asked to meet with the university. we were given some excuses why we cannot meet with the university. And now this is a continuation. I mean, all what was needed is for the university management and leadership to be present and to respond to the issues that were raised by the committee, by the students, but they continue to refuse to come to us. Now, there was a proposal by Honorable Litsia that let's summon them. And I did not get any other counter proposal. So the view of the committee, unless if other members are going to contradict that, is that first of all, I think we'll have to express our utmost concern, and concern, I'm just putting it mildly. In fact, it's our disgust. Maybe that's the language that we have to use to demonstrate that I think this thing has just been going on for too long. The university cannot be allowed to continue to undermine the portfolio committee. So they have to come and account. Like all other organs of state, they must come and account to Parliament about what is happening there. So we must express our serious concern, and also call on them to come. But in the meantime, we'll initiate processes to summon the university to come. So now we're on a 6-week break. So we will see whether we do it within the 6 weeks break, whether members will be willing to come back and engage with them, or we'll summon them to come when we come back. But I think when we come back, the program will be congested. The issues will have been overtaken by developments. So the sooner we get them on here, come and engage with us, the better. So generally, that is the summary on the university. Our apologies to all the other stakeholders who have been invited. Unfortunately, we can't proceed because the university is not here, the council and management. I'm going to check if there are comments to that proposal and my summary. If members are comfortable with that, so that's how we're going to summarize the issue of CPUT.
So sorry, Chair.
Who's Nanga?
My name is Nanga Totana. CPUT newly inaugurated SRC president.
Okay, let's listen to President.
Yes, Chair, I'm just wanted to make remarks, perhaps comment on what you've just given us as way forward with regards to CPUT. I would love to propose, Chair, that can this matter be attended as soon as possible within that 6 weeks of period break? Because while some of the matters that we have raised from the side of student leadership, it's matters of agency. I feel that 6 weeks will be too long for those matters to be attended to. Thank you, Chair. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Nanga, the President. We take your point. I think it's a correct point that 6 weeks is going to be too much. So we will work to make sure that we get CPUT to come and meet with us. Obviously, we will have to get the commitment of all the parties to come because they are now on recess, but I think it's going to be a 3-hour session, so it shouldn't be difficult to get all the parties here. We will make the necessary applications to get approval of the meeting and to get the summonses to the university and to summon them to come. We cannot have a situation where people are unaccountable. People who are in charge of public universities refusing to account to Parliament. I mean, that's not right. That's not something that we must allow to happen in our lifetime. We must hold the Vice Chancellor and the Council accountable. Where I'm sitting, I've got no doubt as to where the problem is, but I think we need to call them to engage with them. The Vice Chancellor cannot continue to give us them to do what he's doing now, because that is completely out of order. For him to continue to do that, that is not his own personal fiefdom. That institution is an asset that belongs to the people of this country. He's only there to manage this asset. He's given the responsibility to manage, so he can't behave as if this thing belongs to him. He must get that message very clear in his head that that thing does not belong to him. It's a university that belongs to the people of this country, founded and funded by the state. So he must also assist us in that. So in the absence of anything, members will work within the 2 weeks to get this meeting to take place. I see members are agreeing by their absence, by their silence, sorry, not by their absence. Is it fine, members? I see all says it's fine. Can I just get one more member to indicate whether we're on the right track, and then we'll close the meeting?
Agreed to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Numalo and Honorable Mkachwa, saying that we are on the right track. Let's do that. Anele, there are minutes. Are there minutes? Anele?
Yeah, 2 sets of minutes, Chair, the 16th and the 17th of March.
Okay, are we able to quickly deal with these minutes, members? Let me present both sets. Any comments, any questions, Honorable Litzie?
I'm moving for the adoption of both.
Okay, let's move for the adoption of both. The Honorable Litzie moves. Any objection, any seconder? I take it members have read the minutes. Any seconder? So we don't have a seconder for the adoption of the minutes.
Honorable Numalo is seconding, just that his mic is a problem.
We are seconding, Chair.
Okay, Momsbia, thank you very much. I thought Honorable Litzie wanted to second himself, but thank you, Momsbia. Any objection? No objection to the adoption of the minutes. So the minutes are therefore adopted. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Do you mind if I raise one matter, Chair?
Okay.
In relation to the minutes or minuting or recording of our meetings, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to note that I'd like the meeting to note that the recording or scripting of our meetings by PMG are not entirely accurate at times, or perhaps one is finding variances in terms of what a member would have said in the portfolio committee and how it is then scripted in the minutes of the PMG. And I think Chair can comments of or colleagues of the Secretariat kindly assist us with that to ensure that, I don't know how they liaise perhaps with PMG, but to ensure that the sentiments of members are not misrepresented in those particular archives, Chair. Thank you so much. It's semantics really, but if you look into the semantics, it really changes what members are then speaking to.
Okay. All right, it's a point that is noted, and we'll follow it up. The Secretariat will follow it up and see that it's attended to. Sometimes the PMG is an organization that is outside of us. They've got their own approach in minuting, which is different from ours. But yeah, where matters are within our control, we will work on it with the Secretariat. But your point has been noted, and I think the PMG people are also on the platform. They have noted that. Thank you very much, Honorable Mukasho. Can we close? I note what I was able to read what Thabo was saying. We'll invite SAUS when we get a presentation of the HEA report and the recommendation, which Thabo is saying they've rejected them as the student leadership. But let's get the history, let's get the background of the issues, and we'll take it from there. SAUS will be invited to present. Okay, members, have a good afternoon and enjoy your recess period. We're going to interrupt it one more time, probably next week or the week after next. CPUT will come here. We'll have a conversation with them. They can run, but they can't hide. We'll get them to come to the committee. Thank you very much, members. The meeting is adjourned.
Long live the chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.